Nero Wolfe and the Shapeshifter. It was a Monday in late October when the woman who didn't exist rang our doorbell. I say didn't exist because by the time I got around to checking her credentials, which I always do, being Archie Goodwin, confidential assistant to Nero Wolfe, and the man who keeps the brownstone on West 35th Street from being overrun by lunatics, con artists, and people who think they can pay in installments. She had already evaporated from every database, directory, and document she claimed to have come from. But I'm getting ahead of myself. It was 3:15 in the afternoon. Wolfe was upstairs in the plant rooms with Theodore, communing with his orchids and pretending the rest of humanity didn't exist. I was at my desk in the office pretending to organize files while actually reading the sports section when the doorbell rang. Through the one-way glass panel, bulletproof naturally like all the windows in the brownstone since the incident last spring, I could see a woman on the stoop, early 40s, well-dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my monthly salary. Dark hair pulled back in a business-like knot, carrying a burgundy leather briefcase. She had the look of a corporate attorney or investment banker, someone who made decisions that moved millions and didn't lose sleep over it. I opened the door, but kept the chain on. Yes, I need to see Nero Wolfe. Her voice was steady, controlled, but I caught something underneath. Not fear exactly, but something close to it. My name is Margot Hendris. I'm willing to pay his standard retainer immediately. Mr. Wolfe doesn't see people without an appointment, I said, which was true about half the time, and he's engaged at the moment. If you'd like to explain your business, I can. Someone is going to die, she said it flatly. The way you might say it's going to rain. Someone already has, and the police are chasing a ghost. From inside the brownstone, I heard the click of claws on the marble floor. Caesar, the largest of our 5 Dobermans, appeared in the hallway, his dark eyes fixed on the door. He was followed by Diana, the smallest and swiftest, her lean body taut with alertness. They didn't bark. Fritz had trained them well, but their presence was its own message. The dogs won't hurt you if you're invited in, I said, but I need more than dramatic pronouncements before I can do that. Margot Hendris's eyes widened slightly as she glimpsed the dogs through the gap in the door. I read about them. The 5 Dobermans and the pit bull, security measures after the bombing attempt. 6 excellent reasons to be truthful. I agreed. Start with why you think someone's going to die. She pulled an envelope from her briefcase and held it up. Because I received this yesterday, and because 3 days ago I watched a man named Philip Caldwell walk into the Mercer building at 9:30 in the morning, except he couldn't have because at 9:30 that same morning, Philip Caldwell was in a board meeting in Chicago with 17 witnesses. Maybe you were mistaken. I wasn't. Her voice hardened. I've known Philip Caldwell for 8 years. We've worked together, had dinner together, negotiated contracts together. It was him, his walk, his mannerisms, even the way he adjusted his tie when he was thinking, but it wasn't him. And 6 hours later, a woman named Beatrice Hollet was dead in her office on the 42nd floor of that same building. I studied her through the gap. She met my eyes without flinching. "Wait here," I said, and closed the door. Caesar and Diana followed me to the office where I picked up the house phone and buzzed the plant rooms. Theodore answered. "Archie for Mr. Wolfe." "He's with the Phalaenopsis," Theodore said reproachfully, as if I'd suggested interrupting a papal audience. "Tell him there's a woman at the door who claims she saw a man who was simultaneously in 2 places at once." and that this impossible man may be connected to a murder. There was a pause, then Wolfe's voice with its familiar grumble. What does she want to hire you? She's offering the standard retainer. Another pause. I'm busy. She says someone else is going to die. They always do. Get rid of her. She has an envelope, probably threatening letter, possibly ransom demand. She claims the police are investigating the wrong person because the real suspect appears to have a supernatural talent for being in two places at once. I could hear Wolfe breathing into the phone, which meant he was annoyed but interested. I'll be down at 6. If she wishes to wait, put her in the front room. Fritz will provide refreshment. I'll tell her. I hung up and returned to the door. Margot Hendricks was still there looking at her watch. Mr. Wolfe will see you at 6, I said, removing the chain and opening the door wide. You can wait in the front room. Fair warning, we have 6 dogs and they take their security duties seriously. They won't attack unless you make a threatening move, but they will absolutely know if you're carrying a weapon. I'm not armed, she said, stepping into the hallway. Caesar and Diana approached, sniffing carefully. Mars emerged from the kitchen, followed by Apollo and Minerva. The 3 additional Dobermans formed a loose semicircle, their dark eyes assessing the visitor. Finally, Loyal, our brick-red pit bull with a white chest blaze and notched ear, trotted in from the office, his muscular 45 lb frame radiating alertness. Margot Hendricks stood perfectly still, letting them inspect her. I've never seen such disciplined dogs. They've had excellent training, I said, and they've learned that people who come here usually mean trouble. This way, please. I led her to the front room where Fritz appeared, with his impeccable timing, bearing a tray with coffee, tea, and some of his extraordinary almond cookies. The dogs followed us in and arranged themselves strategically. Caesar near the door, Mars by the window, Apollo and Diana flanking the chairs, Minerva in the corner, where she could observe everything, and Loyal near my feet. Thank you for waiting, I said. While we have 3 hours to kill, perhaps you'd like to tell me more about this Philip Caldwell situation, starting with who you are and why you were watching him. She sat in the red leather chair, set her briefcase on the floor, and accepted a cup of coffee from Fritz. I'm a senior partner at Hendricks & Lowe, a boutique investment firm. We manage portfolios for high net worth clients, private equity, venture capital, some specialized trading. Philip Caldwell was a business associate. He works for Olay Ventures, one of our competitor firms, and Beatrice Olay, the founder. She started Olay Ventures 20 years ago and built it into one of the most successful mid-sized investment firms in the city, worth about $400 million, give or take. I whistled softly. That's a lot of give or take. 3 days ago, Beatrice called me. We'd known each other for years, competitors, but friendly ones. She said she needed to talk to me about something urgent, something involving Philip Caldwell. She wouldn't say more over the phone, but she sounded frightened. We agreed to meet at her office that afternoon at 3. But you saw Caldwell that morning? Yes, I was having breakfast at the Lexington Cafe across from the Mercer building where Hall Ventures has their offices. I saw Philip walk in at 9:30. I'm certain it was him, but when I later mentioned it to the police, they showed me phone records, credit card receipts, and security footage from Chicago, proving he was at a board meeting there from 8:30 until noon. Maybe it was someone who looked like him. That's what everyone says. But I know Philip. I've negotiated against him for years. It wasn't just appearance. It was the way he moved, the way he carried himself. It was perfect. You said Beatrice Olay is dead. Margot's hand tightened around her coffee cup. When I arrived at her office at 3 the police were already there. Beatrice had been strangled. Her assistant found her at 2:15. The office was locked from the inside, no signs of forced entry. Security cameras showed only Beatrice entering that morning and no one else all day except Philip Caldwell at 9:30. The cameras didn't catch him, but I saw him go in. Did you tell the police? Of course. They were very polite and very clear that I was mistaken. Philip Caldwell has an airtight alibi. They're treating it as a locked room mystery, possibly suicide made to look like murder, though that makes no sense given the evidence. I leaned back in my chair. Loyal's head rested on my foot, a warm weight. You mentioned an envelope. She retrieved it from her briefcase and handed it to me. It was cream-colored, expensive stock, addressed to her office in neat handwriting with no return address. Inside was a single sheet of matching paper with a message in the same handwriting. You saw what you weren't supposed to see. Stop asking questions or you'll join Beatrice. The shapeshifter sees all. The shapeshifter. I read aloud. Theatrical. Terrifying, Margot corrected, because whoever sent this knows I saw Philip Caldwell. And they're right. I shouldn't have seen him, but I did. I studied the letter. The handwriting was distinctive but careful, possibly disguised. The paper was high quality, but available at any decent stationery store. The postmark was Manhattan, sent Saturday. What questions have you been asking? I called Philip's office. I called 3 people who know him. I tried to find out if he has a brother, a cousin, anyone who might look like him. And I kept asking the police to review the Mercer Building security footage more carefully. And nothing. Philip Caldwell is an only child. His parents are dead. He has no cousins in the country and the security footage is useless. There's a blind spot near the service entrance that the cameras don't cover. I tapped the letter against my palm. Why Nero Wolfe? Why not hire more private security or go to the FBI? Because the police think I'm hysterical. Because Philip Caldwell's alibi is perfect. Because someone managed to murder Beatrice Olay in a locked office with no one seen entering or leaving. And because she paused, meeting my eyes, because I read about the Allard case, the one where Mr. Wolfe proved that 3 supposedly unrelated deaths were connected through a pattern no one else saw. If someone is playing games with identity and presence, creating impossible situations, I need someone who thinks in patterns and possibilities, not just evidence and alibis. From upstairs came the faint sound of footsteps. Wolfe moving between the orchid benches. The afternoon light slanted through the bulletproof windows, casting shadows where the dogs lay, watching our visitor. All right, I said you'll have your meeting at 6. Mr. Wolfe will decide if he's interested. In the meantime, I need you to write down everything you know about Philip Caldwell, Beatrice Olay, and anyone else connected to this situation. Names, relationships, financial interests, grudges, affairs, everything. I've already prepared notes. She pulled a leather portfolio from her briefcase and handed it to me. Detailed backgrounds on everyone involved, timeline of events, copies of the relevant police reports I was able to obtain, and financial statements for both Hall Ventures and my own firm, showing our recent transactions. I flipped through it. 30 pages, neatly organized, cross-referenced, thorough. I'm a detail person, Mr. Goodwin. It's why I'm good at my job. She smiled slightly. And I assume it's why you're good at yours. Among other reasons, I agreed. including knowing when someone is telling the truth and when they're not. Her smile faded. I'm telling you the truth. Someone is manipulating identity and presence like a magic trick, and they've already killed once. We'll see what Mr. Wolfe thinks, I said, standing. Make yourself comfortable. Fritz will bring you anything you need. The dogs will ensure you stay comfortable right where you are. I left her there with the portfolio and the envelope. Caesar stationed at the door like a dark sentinel and went to my desk to start reading. By the time Wolfe descended from the plant rooms at 6 a.m., I had filled 3 pages of my notebook with observations, questions, and the beginning of a very bad feeling about this case. Because Margot Hendress was right about one thing. Someone had managed to be in 2 places at once, and in my experience, when the impossible becomes possible, someone usually ends up dead. At 6 a.m. precisely, Nero Wolfe entered the office, went to his desk, arranged his bulk in his custom-made chair, the only chair in Manhattan capable of supporting his 1/7 of a ton with dignity, and rang for beer. Fritz appeared with 2 bottles of Remmers on a tray, opened one, poured it properly, and vanished. Wolfe drank, set down the glass, and looked at me. Well, woman in the front room, I said. Name is Margot Hendress, senior partner at an investment firm, claims she witnessed a murder suspect who couldn't have been there. Murder victim is Beatrice Hollet, founder of a competing firm worth $400 million. Suspect is Philip Caldwell, who has 17 witnesses placing him in Chicago at the time Hendricks saw him in Manhattan. She received a threatening letter signed the Shapeshifter. She's prepared to pay your retainer. She brought 30 pages of background documentation, and she's genuinely frightened. People are frequently frightened. Wolfe said, it's tedious. The police are calling it a locked room mystery. Hollet was strangled in her own office with no one seen entering or leaving. Locked room mysteries are parlor tricks for detective novels. In reality, they're always simple. Someone entered, someone killed, someone left. The complexity is in hiding the entry and exit, not in defying physics. Agreed. But this one has a twist. Hicks insists she saw Philip Caldwell enter the building at 9:30. The murder occurred around 2. Caldwell was in Chicago the entire time with airtight documentation. Wolfe's eyes narrowed slightly. She's mistaken. That's what everyone tells her. But she's a professional who's known Caldwell for 8 years. She says it wasn't just appearance. It was his mannerisms, his walk, everything. Then someone impersonated him. Makeup, costuming, careful study, theatrical, but not impossible. Possible, I agreed. But why? If you're going to murder someone, why draw attention by impersonating someone with a perfect alibi? Why not just be yourself, or better yet, invisible? Wool drank beer and said nothing, which meant he was thinking. There's more, I continued. The letter she received knows she saw Caldwell or whoever it was. It threatens her specifically for asking questions, and it's signed the Shapeshifter, which suggests either someone theatrical or someone who wants us to think they're theatrical. Bring her in, Wolfe said. I went to the front room where Margot Hendress was sitting exactly where I'd left her. The dogs maintaining their watchful positions. Mr. Wolfe will see you now. She stood, smoothed her suit, picked up her briefcase, and followed me to the office. The dogs came too, rearranging themselves around the room. Caesar and Mars near the door. Apollo by Wolfe's desk, Diana near the safe, Minerva in her corner, and Loyal at my feet under my desk. Wolfe watched this procession with mild disapproval. He tolerated the dogs because they were effective security, but he preferred his office without foreigner other than himself. "Sit," he told Margot, gesturing to the red leather chair. She sat. "Mr. Goodwin has summarized your situation," Wolfe said. "I'm not interested." I blinked. Usually, he waited at least 5 minutes before rejecting a client. Margot didn't blink. "Why not?" "Because you're describing an impersonation. However skillful, such matters are for the police, not for me. If you're being threatened, hire bodyguards. If you believe the police are incompetent, hire a different private investigator. I investigate murders, blackmail, and complex fraud. I don't chase theatrical amateurs playing dress-up." "Beatrice Holay is dead," Margot said quietly. "That's murder. The police are investigating her death. They don't need my assistance. They're investigating the wrong thing. They're treating it as a locked room puzzle when the real question is, how did Philip Caldwell's perfect double get into that building?" "You saw someone who resembled Caldwell. Your mind, influenced by familiarity and expectation, filled in the details. It's a common cognitive error. The real killer is someone else entirely, someone the police will identify through conventional methods." Margot opened her briefcase and pulled out a folder. "I anticipated this, so I did more research over the weekend." She handed the folder to Wolfe, who didn't take it. She set it on his desk instead. "What am I looking at?" Wolfe asked, not touching it. "3 other cases," Margot said, "going back 6 months. In each case, someone was seen in a place where they shouldn't have been, where they probably weren't. And in each case, something valuable disappeared, or someone died shortly afterward." That got his attention. Wolfe's eyes opened slightly wider, which for him was equivalent to sitting bolt upright. "Explain." Margot flipped open the folder. 4 months ago, a man named Henrik Osgood was seen entering his ex-wife's apartment in Brooklyn at 11 p.m. The doorman, who'd known Osgood for 6 years, swore it was him. But Osgood was in Boston giving a lecture to 300 people at 11 p.m. with dozens of witnesses. When his ex-wife was found dead the next morning, sleeping pills in her wine, the police initially suspected Osgood until his alibi checked out. They ruled it accidental death, possibly suicide, and the doorman insisted it was Osgood. The police decided he was mistaken, but I talked to him yesterday. He's retired now, but he's absolutely certain. He said it wasn't just appearance. Osgood had a distinctive way of moving, a slight limp from an old sports injury. The man he saw had that exact limp. Wolfe frowned. "Continue." 3 months ago, a rare manuscript worth $70,000 was stolen from the Peton collection. Security footage showed a woman named Lydia Watts entering the collection after hours using a staff key card. But Watts was in London that week, attending her sister's wedding. 50 people can verify it. The police decided someone had cloned her keycard and that the security footage was too grainy to be certain of identification. But the head of security, a man named Patterson, insists it was Watts. Not just physically, but the way she walked, the way she held her bag, even the way she paused at a certain painting she always admired. He'd worked with her for 4 years. He's certain. I was taking notes now. My bad feeling getting worse. 3rd case. 5 months ago, an investment broker named Gerald Tavistock was seen having dinner at the Four Seasons with a client who later transferred $200,000 out of his account based on Tavistock's advice during that dinner. But Tavistock was in Miami that night at a conference. Hotel records, flight manifests, credit card receipts, all confirmed. When the client complained about the unauthorized transfer, Tavistock's firm investigated and found that someone had indeed impersonated him. They re-imbured the client. The case was never solved. The client, a man named Peaton, who'd known Tavistock for 3 years, swore it was him, not just physically, but his voice, his manner of speaking, even his characteristic gestures. Wolfe was silent for a long moment, his fingers interlaced over his middle mound. "You're suggesting a pattern. I'm saying someone has perfected the art of impersonation to an extraordinary degree. Someone who can study a target well enough to replicate not just their appearance, but their mannerisms, their gait, their habits. Someone who's been practicing this for months and who's now graduated from theft and fraud to murder." "Why Philip Caldwell?" I asked. "If this shapeshifter, assuming there is one, killed Beatrice Hole, why frame Caldwell? Why make it obvious through impersonation instead of keeping it clean?" "That's what I need Nero Wolfe to tell me," Margot said, "because I can't make sense of it either. But I know what I saw, and I know Beatrice called me because she was frightened of something involving Philip Caldwell, and now she's dead, and I'm being threatened, and the police are chasing ghosts while the real killer is still out there." Wool picked up the folder and paged through it slowly. I could see the tension in his jaw, which meant he was annoyed at being interested. "The police have investigated these matters?" he asked, to the extent that they considered them at all. "The Osgood case is closed as accidental death. The Peaton theft is still technically open, but inactive. The Tavistock fraud was settled privately. No one has connected them because they're different crimes in different boroughs with different victims. But you connected them because I started looking for other cases where someone was seen somewhere they probably weren't. It's not a common phenomenon. These 4 cases, including Beatrix's murder, are the only ones I could find in the past 6 months." Wool set down the folder and looked at her. "What was your relationship with Beatrice Hole?" Marat didn't hesitate. "Professional rivals. Occasional allies. We competed for clients, but sometimes collaborated on larger deals. I respected her. We had dinner once a month to talk shop and gossip about the industry. Nothing more." "What did she want to discuss about Philip Caldwell?" "She didn't say, but she sounded frightened, which was unusual for Beatrice. She was normally unflappable. Why would Caldwell frighten her?" "I don't know, but Olay Ventures has been struggling lately. There are rumors of mismanagement, bad investments. If Caldwell was involved in something questionable, Beatrice might have discovered it. Or, I said, Caldwell might have discovered something about Beatrice, and this shapeshifter is protecting her secrets." Margot shook her head. "Beatrice is the victim, and she wanted to tell me something." Wolfe closed his eyes, which meant he was thinking hard. The office was quiet, except for the soft breathing of the dogs and the tick of the clock on the wall. Finally, he opened his eyes and looked at Margot. "I don't like cases based on eyewitness testimony. People are unreliable. They see what they expect to see, remember what they want to remember, and confuse conviction with accuracy." "I know what I saw," Margot said. "You believe you know there's a difference. However," he paused, "the pattern you've identified is interesting. 4 cases of alleged impersonation, each involving someone who knew the target well, each described with the same certainty. Either you found 4 people suffering the same delusion, or someone has indeed mastered the art of becoming other people. So, you'll take the case?" "No." She stared at him. "But you just said," I said, "the pattern is interesting." "I didn't say I'm willing to chase it." Your case rests on the assumption that impersonation is possible at a level that defies normal human capability, ideal in facts and logic, not theatrical impossibilities. The police will solve B.S. Holloway's murder through conventional means. If they don't, that's their failure, not mine. Someone threatened me, Margot said, her voice rising slightly. That letter is probably a prank from someone who read about the case in the newspapers and wants attention. Or it's from the real killer trying to create confusion. Either way, it's not sufficient reason for me to involve myself. She stood up abruptly, her face flushed. You're making a mistake. This person, this shapeshifter, they're escalating. First fraud, then theft, now murder. And they're good enough that no one believes they're victims. If you won't help me, they'll keep doing it. Then the police will eventually catch them. Wolfe said, "Good afternoon, Miss Ricks." For a moment, I thought she might throw something at him. Instead, she gathered her briefcase, turned on her heel, and marched toward the door. Caesar and Mars moved aside to let her pass. "Wait," I said, standing. "At least let me." "Don't bother, Mr. Goodwin. I understand. Your employer doesn't believe in theatrical impossibilities. I hope he's right, because if he's wrong, I'll be the next one they find dead." She yanked open the door and left, her footsteps sharp on the hallway marble. I went to the window and watched her descend the stoop, hail a cab, and disappear into Manhattan traffic. "Well," I said, turning back to Wolfe, "that was smooth. She's hysterical. She's frightened. And she made a good case that someone is doing something genuinely unusual. Unusual doesn't require my attention. I have orchids to tend and books to read. Her problem is the police's problem." I sat back down at my desk and picked up the folder Margot had left. Inside were newspaper clippings, police reports, and her handwritten notes connecting the 4 cases. It was thorough work, the kind of detailed analysis that didn't come from hysteria. "You know what bothers me?" I said she didn't ask for our help because she's scared. She asked because someone managed to kill a woman in a locked office after being seen somewhere they couldn't have been. And she thinks that same someone is coming for her next. That's not hysteria. That's reasonable threat assessment. Your point? My point is that you rejected her too quickly. You always reject clients too quickly, but usually you at least pretend to consider their case first. Wolfe opened his eyes and glared at me. "I don't pretend. I assess and decide. This case requires chasing shadows and validating the unreliable testimony of witnesses who claim to have seen the impossible. I won't do it. Even though 4 separate people in 4 separate cases all claim to have seen someone they knew well in a place where that person provably wasn't. A witness testimony is notoriously unreliable, not when the witness knows the subject personally and describes specific mannerisms and behaviors. That's not mistaken identity. That's either mass delusion or extremely skilled impersonation or fraud. All 4 witnesses could be lying. To what end? Henrik Osgood's ex-wife is dead, and he had an airtight alibi that saved him from prosecution. Why would the doorman lie? Lydia Watts was out of the country when the manuscript was stolen. Why would the security chief lie? Gerald Tavistock's firm reimbursed the client and investigated him. Why would the client lie? Wolfe said nothing, which meant I was making sense, and he didn't like it. And Margot Hendris, I continued, has nothing to gain by claiming she saw Philip Caldwell, except a reputation for being hysterical. She's a senior partner at an investment firm. Her professional credibility matters. If she says she saw him, I believe she saw someone who looked exactly like him. Then the police can investigate. The police think she's mistaken, but we could investigate. We could find out if there really is a pattern, if these 4 cases are connected, and if someone is running around Manhattan being other people. Wolfe picked up his beer glass, found it empty, and scowled at it. No, Fritz made V-birds for dinner. I could ask him to save some for when we inevitably take this case tomorrow after Margot Hendris turns up dead and Inspector Kramer comes here, demanding to know why we turned her away. Archie, yes sir. I said no. Accepted. I shrugged and went back to reading the folder, but I knew Nero Wolfe and I knew he was interested despite himself. The pattern was too elegant, too strange. 4 cases of impossible presence, each one witnessed by someone credible, each one dismissed as mistaken identity. Someone was playing a very sophisticated game, and sooner or later, Wolfe wouldn't be able to resist finding out who. I gave it until midnight before the doorbell rang again. I was right about the timing, wrong about who was ringing it. It wasn't Margot Hendris coming back. It was Inspector Kramer, and he was furious. Kramer bulled his way into the office at 12:45 Tuesday morning, his overcoat still on, his face the color of a particularly angry sunset. The dogs, who knew him by now and had stopped threatening him months ago, merely watched as he stomped past them to Wolfe's desk. "She's dead," he said without preamble. I felt my stomach drop. Margot Hendris shot twice in her apartment. Neighbor heard the shots at 11:30 and called it in. By the time we got there, she was gone. Window open, fire escape accessible. No witnesses. He yanked off his hat and threw it on Wolfe's desk. And I just find out that she was here this afternoon, trying to hire you. Wolfe, who had been roused from bed by the doorbell and was sitting at his desk in his yellow pajamas and brown dressing gown, regarded Kramer with hooded eyes. "Who told you?" "Her assistant going through her calendar to notify her appointments. Your name was there for 6 p.m. yesterday. So I came here to ask what the hell she wanted and whether you're going to make my life difficult about it. She wanted me to investigate the murder of Beatrice Hole," Wolfe said. I declined. Kramer's jaw tightened. "Why?" "Because she offered no evidence, only speculation and eyewitness testimony I considered unreliable. She claimed to have seen Philip Caldwell entering the Mercer building on the morning of Holloway's murder, despite Caldwell being in Chicago. I assessed her as mistaken or hysterical. "She wasn't hysterical," I said quietly. "She was frightened, and she was right to be." Kramer turned on me. "What did she tell you?" I gave him the summary. The sighting of Caldwell, the locked room murder of Beatrice Hole, the threatening letter, and the pattern Margot had identified, connecting 4 separate cases of alleged impersonation. I included everything except my own assessment that Wolfe had been wrong to reject her. When I finished, Kramer sat down heavily in the red leather chair. "Christ, you're telling me she came here with evidence of a serial criminal, and you turned her away?" "I'm telling you, she came here with a theory," Wolfe corrected. "A theory based on eyewitness accounts that contradict documented fact. The police are better equipped to investigate such matters. The police thought she was mistaken about Caldwell. We still do. The man has 17 witnesses in Chicago. Then she was mistaken." "Was she?" Kramer pulled out a cigar, remembered where he was, and put it back, "because now she's dead 6 hours after leaving your office, And that threatening letter she showed you. We found it in her apartment. The shapeshifter sees all. So either someone is playing games or there really is someone out there impersonating people. The letter proves nothing, Wolfe said. Anyone could have written it. Yeah. Well, someone shot Margot Hendricks with a .38. And according to her doorman, the only person who visited her apartment tonight was her business partner, a man named Roland Jessup. Except Roland Jessup was at a charity gala from 8 until midnight with 200 witnesses, including the mayor. The office went very quiet. I see, Wolfe said softly. Do you? Kramer leaned forward. Because I'm starting to think maybe Margot Hendricks wasn't as crazy as everyone thought. Maybe there really is someone out there who can be in two places at once. And maybe you should have listened to her when you had the chance. Wool's face remained impassive, but I saw his fingers tighten slightly on the arm of his chair. What do you want from me, Mr. Kramer? I want you to fix this. You turned away a client who came to you for help, and now she's dead. You want to sit there and tell me that's not your problem. Fine, but I've got 2 dead women, both connected to high-stakes finance, both killed under circumstances that suggest either supernatural intervention or the most skilled impersonator I've ever seen. And I've got eyewitnesses who swear they saw people who couldn't have been there. So I'm asking, since you're so smart, what the hell am I dealing with? Wolfe closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, his expression was resigned. You're dealing with someone who has studied their targets extensively enough to replicate not just appearance, but behavior, mannerisms, and habits. Someone with access to their target schedules, their social circles, their routines. Someone who chooses moments when the real target has an ironclad alibi, creating an impossible situation that discredits eyewitnesses and protects the impersonator. So, it's possible, difficult, but possible. Theatrical makeup, careful observation, professional training in mimicry, had a detailed knowledge of the target's life, and you could convince someone who knew them well, at least briefly. Why, I asked, if you can pull off that level of impersonation, why use it to kill people? Why not just rob them or steal their identity for profit? Perhaps both, Wall said. The Peyton manuscript theft, the Tavistock investment fraud, those were profitable. Beatrice Hollet's murder and Margot Hendricks's murder suggest a different motive. What motive? Eliminating people who knew too much. Beatrice Hollet called Margot Hendricks about something involving Philip Caldwell. Before they could meet, Hollet was dead. Aris began investigating, connected the pattern of impersonations, and came here. 6 hours later, she was dead. Kramer nodded slowly. So, someone's covering their tracks. Someone is ensuring that anyone who gets close to understanding the pattern is eliminated. The impersonation serves 2 purposes. First, to commit the crime while framing someone with an alibi. Second, to create confusion that makes the crime seem impossible, thereby discouraging serious investigation. It's working, Kramer said grimly. Half my detectives think we're chasing ghosts. The other half think the witnesses are lying or incompetent. What about the Hendricks murder scene? I asked. Any evidence? Kramer shook his head. Clean. Whoever it was knew what they were doing. The only thing we've got is the doorman's statement that Roland Jessup visited at 11:15 and left at 11:40, but Jessup was at the charity gala the entire time. You're sure? The mayor himself vouched for him. Jessup was at his table from 8 until midnight, never left for more than a bathroom break. Kramer rubbed his face. I've got a murder committed by someone who looks exactly like someone else. I've got 2 dead women connected by their knowledge of investment fraud. And I've got a threatening letter from someone who calls themselves the shapeshifter. What I don't have is a damned clue how to catch them." Wolfe was silent for a long moment. Then Archie, "Get dressed. You're going out." I blinked. "At 1 in the morning, Inspector Kramer will provide you with access to Margot Hendriss's apartment, her office, and her files. You will interview the doorman, examine the crime scene, and gather every piece of information about her business relationships, her clients, and her recent activities. I want to know what Beatrice Hollet planned to tell her. I want to know why Philip Caldwell was the chosen impersonation, and I want to know who benefits from both women being dead." "You're taking the case," Kramer said. "I'm accepting reality. Margot Hendress came to me for help. I refused her, and she's dead. I don't like being wrong, Mr. Kramer, and I particularly don't like being wrong when it costs lives." Wolfe looked at me. "Move quickly. The shapeshifter is cleaning up loose ends. Find out who the next loose end might be before they become another corpse." I was already standing, heading for the stairs to change. "Give me 10 minutes. "Take 15, Wolfe said. "And Archie." I paused at the door. "Be careful. You're dealing with someone who sees being someone else as natural as breathing. Trust no one's appearance. Verify everything, even you." His lips twitched slightly. "Even me." 20 minutes later, I was in Kramer's car with Sergeant Pearlie Stebbins driving, heading toward Margot Hendriss's apartment building on the Upper East Side. Kramer had made calls, clearing my access to the crime scene and the victim's office. I had my notebook, my camera, and my instinct that this case was going to get worse before it got better. Margot Hendriss's apartment was in a well-maintained pre-war building with a doorman, security cameras, and the kind of quiet elegance that came from having money but not feeling the need to advertise it. The doorman, a man in his 60s named Walter Kemp, was waiting in the lobby with 2 police officers. "Mr. Kemp," I said, showing him the card Kramer had given me, "I need to ask you about tonight." He nodded tiredly. "I already told the police everything." "Tell me again." "Sometimes repetition reveals details." "You saw Roland Jessup arrive at 11:15. "Yes, I've known Mr. Jessup for 3 years. He's been Miss Ricks's business partner the whole time. He walked in at 11:15, said he needed to speak with Miss Hendriss about an urgent matter, and I called up to her apartment. She said to send him up." "What did he look like?" Kemp frowned like himself. Dark suit, gray overcoat, his usual briefcase, maybe a bit tired. It was late, but it was definitely Mr. Jessup. "How can you be sure?" "I know the man, the way he walks, the way he talks. He always greets me by name, asks about my family tonight." He said, "Evening, Walter. Sorry for the late visit. Business emergency." That's how he talks. He's a gentleman. Did he seem nervous or agitated? "No more than usual for a late-night business emergency. Concerned, maybe professional." "And when did he leave?" 11:40. "He came down looking upset. Said Miss Ricks was fine, but they'd had a difficult conversation. Thanked me, left. I didn't think anything of it until the neighbor called about gunshots 15 minutes later. I made notes. Did you see anyone else enter or leave around that time?" "No one, and I was here the whole time. Security cameras cover the lobby and the elevator, not the fire escape or the back entrance, but those are locked and alarmed." I thanked him and went upstairs with one of the officers. Margot Hicks's apartment was on the 8th floor, a 2-bedroom with hardwood floors, expensive furniture, and a view of the East River. The living room was cordoned off with police tape. Her body was gone, but the bloodstains on the Persian rug marked where she'd fallen. 2 shots, Kramer had said. Professional work, the kind that suggested either experience or very cold nerve. I photographed the scene, noting the open window that led to the fire escape, the position of the body, the lack of signs of struggle. Whoever had shot her, she'd either not expected it or had been caught completely off guard. In her office, a small room off the living room, I found her desk neat and organized, her computer locked, her files arranged alphabetically. I photographed everything, bagged some documents that looked relevant, and searched for anything that might explain what Beatrice Hollet had wanted to tell her. In the bottom drawer, under a stack of quarterly reports, I found a handwritten journal. I flipped through it quickly. Most entries were professional notes, meeting summaries, client observations, but the last entry, dated yesterday, caught my eye. B called again, more frightened this time. Says PC has been asking questions about the Whitmore deal. Doesn't trust him anymore. Thinks he's found something. Meeting tomorrow, 3 p.m. to discuss. Need to be careful if PC is involved in fraud. This could blow up both our firms. PC Philip Caldwell. The Whitmore deal. I photographed the page, then kept searching. In another drawer, I found a folder labeled Whitmore Capital Partners, filled with financial documents, investment prospectuses, and handwritten notes in Margot's neat script. I photographed everything, noting names, numbers, and transaction dates. At 3:30 a.m., I left the apartment with 2 shopping bags full of documents and photographs, plus the growing certainty that Margot Hendricks had been killed because she knew something about Philip Caldwell and a deal involving Whitmore Capital Partners. The question was, what had she known? And more importantly, who else knew it? I made one more stop before heading back to the brownstone, Roland Jessup's office building in Midtown. It was locked, but Kramer's credentials got me past the night security guard and up to the 14th floor, where Hendricks and Lowe had their offices. The office was dark, expensive, and exactly what you'd expect from a successful investment firm. I found Jessup's office, photographed his desk and files, and was about to leave when I noticed something odd. On the coat rack behind his door hung a gray overcoat. I checked the label, custom-tailored, expensive. I photographed it from multiple angles, then checked the pockets, empty except for a receipt from a dry cleaner dated yesterday. The coat was spotless, recently cleaned, which meant if the Roland Jessup who visited Margot Hendricks had been wearing a gray overcoat, it wasn't this one. Unless, of course, Jessup owned 2 gray overcoats, or unless someone else had been wearing one that looked exactly like Jessup's. I took the coat. Kramer could return it later with apologies. Right now, I wanted Saul Panza to examine every fiber, every thread, every microscopic detail, because I was starting to believe that Margot Hendricks had been right about everything. Someone really could be in 2 places at once, and they were very, very good at it. I got back to the brownstone at 5:30 in the morning to find Wolfe already in the office, dressed and reading through the folder Margot had left. Fritz had coffee waiting, and the dogs were arranged around the room in their protected positions, alert despite the hour. "Well," Wolfe said as I dropped the shopping bags on my desk, I gave him the full report while I drank coffee and tried to keep my eyes open. The crime scene, the doorman's testimony, Margot's journal entry about Philip Caldwell and the Whitmore deal, and the gray overcoat that might or might not belong to Roland Jessup. When I finished, Wolfe sat back in his chair. So, we have a murder committed by someone impersonating Roland Jessup, similar to Beatrice Holloway's murder committed by someone impersonating Philip Caldwell. The pattern is consistent, except we still don't know why. Why impersonate people who have alibis? Why not just sneak in and out anonymously? Because Wolfe said slowly, the impersonation serves a purpose beyond the crime itself. It creates confusion, discredits witnesses, and most importantly, it sends a message. What message? That the shapeshifter can be anyone, can enter anywhere, can commit crimes while the people being impersonated are elsewhere with unshakable alibis. It's psychological warfare designed to make victims feel helpless and investigators feel incompetent. I nodded. It made sense in a twisted way. So, what's the Whitmore deal? Unknown, but clearly significant. Pass me those files. I handed him the Whitmore Capital Partners folder I'd taken from Margot's apartment. He spent the next hour reading through financial documents while I organized the photographs and evidence I'd collected. At 6:30, Fritz appeared with breakfast, bacon, eggs, toast, and more coffee. The dogs got their morning meal in the kitchen. The house gradually came to life. At 8:00, Wolfe looked up from the files. Call Saw Panza. I want him to examine that overcoat and interview the dry cleaner about exactly when it was brought in and picked up. Then call Oy Cather and Fred Durkin. I'll need them for surveillance. Watching whom? Philip Caldwell and Roland Jessup. I want to know their movements, their habits, their routines. If someone is impersonating them, they're studying them closely. Perhaps we can identify the observer. And what about the Whitmore deal? That requires research. Call Lon Cohen at the Gazette. Tell him I need everything he can find on Whitmore Capital Partners, their recent investments, and any connection to either Hollow Ventures or Hendricks and Lowe. I made the calls. Saul Panza said he'd be over by 9. Ori and Fred would start surveillance immediately. Long Cohen groaned about being asked for research before breakfast, but agreed to dig into Whitmore Capital. At 9:15, Saul arrived, a short, thin man with a genius for detective work and the ability to blend into any background. I gave him the overcoat and the dry cleaner's receipt. I need to know everything about this coat, I said. Fibers, stains, wear patterns, anything that suggests who wore it recently, and talk to the dry cleaner about when it was brought in and by whom. Saul examined the coat carefully. Custom-tailored, expensive, recent cleaning, but there are still traces of something in the lining. He sniffed it. Cologne distinctive. And he pulled out a magnifying glass and examined the collar. A single hair dark, possibly dyed. This could be useful. Also, I said, compare it to any other gray overcoats you can find associated with Roland Jessup. I want to know if he owns 2 identical coats or if this one belongs to someone else. Saul nodded and left with the coat. At 10:00, Lon Cohen called back. Whitmore Capital Partners, he said. Mid-sized investment fund, about $200 million under management, founded 5 years ago by a man named Gerard Whitmore, who previously worked for, wait for it, Holley Ventures. Holley Ventures, I repeated. Beatrice Hollay's firm. The same. Whitmore left 6 years ago, under unclear circumstances. No scandal, but the departure was sudden. He started his own fund and has been moderately successful. But here's the interesting part. 3 months ago, Whitmore Capital announced a major new investment in a biotech startup called Helix Therapeutics. Big press release, lot of hype. The investment was supposed to be $50 million. Supposed to be. Word on the street is, the deal fell through. Helix Therapeutics is claiming Whitmore Capital never delivered the funds. Whitmore Capital is claiming Helix didn't meet the required milestones. The whole thing is tied up in litigation. Any connection to Philip Caldwell or Hendricks and Lowe. Philip Caldwell works for Ole Ventures, which has a minority stake in Helix Therapeutics. And Hendricks and Lowe was supposedly advising Whitmore Capital on the investment structure. So yeah, they're all connected. And Margot Hris's journal mentioned Caldwell asking questions about the Whitmore deal, right? So my guess, someone's cooking the books. Either Whitmore never had the $50 million to invest, or he diverted it somewhere else, or there's fraud in how the deal was structured, and Beatus Holloway and Margot Hendricks figured it out, which got them killed. Apparently, you want me to keep digging. Find out everything you can about Gerard Whitmore, Helix Therapeutics, and the financial structure of that deal. Also see if there's any connection to Henry Osgood, Lydia Watts, or Gerald Tavistock, the other impersonation cases. Margot identified the what cases. I gave him the summary. Lon whistled. Okay, that's weird. I'll see what I can find. I hung up and reported to Wolfe, who was still reading financial documents with the concentration of a man deciphering ancient Sanskrit. So we have a failed investment deal involving Whitmore Capital, Helix Therapeutics, Ole Ventures, and Hendricks and Lowe. I summarized. Beatrice Ole and Margot Hendricks both discovered something about it. Both got killed by someone impersonating people they knew. The question is, who's behind it? Gerard Whitmore is the obvious suspect, Wall said. If he's committed fraud and the two women discovered it, he has motive. But does he have the skill to impersonate Philip Caldwell and Roland Jessup convincingly enough to fool people who've known them for years? Maybe he hired someone. Possibly. Or Wolfe paused. What if the impersonations aren't about disguise at all? What do you mean? What if Philip Caldwell and Roland Jessup are involved? What if they're allowing someone to impersonate them or actively participating in creating the alibis? I thought about it. Caldwell was in Chicago when he was supposedly seen in Manhattan. But what if he arranged for someone who looked like him to be seen deliberately knowing he had an alibi? That would make the witnesses look crazy and deflect suspicion. Exactly. And Roland Jessup was at a charity gala when he supposedly visited Margot Hendricks. But what if Jessup arranged for someone to impersonate him, creating the perfect impossible crime? But why? What do they gain? If Caldwell and Jessup are both involved in the Whitmore fraud, they have motive to eliminate anyone who discovers it. The impersonation serves to confuse the investigation and create doubt about witness reliability. So, we need to talk to Caldwell and Jessup. We need to understand the Whitmore deal first. Call that biotech company Helix Therapeutics. I want to speak with someone who can explain what went wrong with their investment. I looked up Helix Therapeutics and called their corporate office. After being transferred 3 times, I reached the CEO, a woman named Dr. Claudia Brennan. I explained that I was calling on behalf of Nero Wolfe regarding the Whitmore Capital investment. I can't discuss confidential business matters. She said immediately, "2 women are dead, Dr. Brennan. Both were connected to that investment. If you want to keep your company out of a murder investigation, I suggest you cooperate." There was a long pause. Then what do you want to know? Everything. Start with the deal itself. Whitmore Capital agreed to invest $50 million in Helix Therapeutics in exchange for a 15% equity stake. We needed the capital to complete Phase 3 clinical trials for our lead drug candidate. The investment was structured through a special purpose vehicle, advised by Hendricks and Lowe. Philip Caldwell from Hole Ventures was supposed to oversee the transaction as part of Hole's existing stake in our company. What went wrong? The money never arrived. Whitmore Capital claimed we hadn't met certain milestones, which we had. When we pressed them, they claimed the funds had been transferred, but we couldn't locate them. Our forensic accountants traced the money through several offshore accounts and determined it had been diverted. Diverted where? We don't know. The trail goes cold in the Cayman Islands. We're suing Whitmore Capital for fraud. They're countersuing us for breach of contract. It's a mess. When did Beatrice Hole get involved? About 3 weeks ago, she called me and said she'd been reviewing the transaction documents and found irregularities. She asked for copies of everything: contracts, wire transfers, communications with Whitmore Capital. I sent them to her. Did she say what irregularities she found? No, but she seemed concerned. She said if her suspicions were correct, several people at Hole Ventures could be implicated, including Philip Caldwell. She didn't name names, but yes, I got the impression Caldwell might be involved. And Margot Hendricks, did you speak with her? Once she called 2 days ago, asking the same questions as Beatrice. I told her what I'd told Beatrice and sent her copies of the documents. She said she was going to confront someone about it. Did she say who? No, just that she needed to verify something first. I thanked her and hung up. So, Beatrice Hole found irregularities in the Whitmore deal. Margot Hendricks followed up. Both ended up dead. Wolfe nodded slowly, and both were killed by impersonators, which suggests the fraud extends beyond simple financial manipulation. Someone is using impersonation as a weapon, both to commit crimes and to create alibis. We need to find Gerard Whitmore. Indeed, call. The doorbell rang through the bulletproof one-way glass. I could see a man on the stoop, mid-40s, expensive suit, confident bearing. He looked familiar, though I couldn't place him immediately. I went to the door, but kept the chain on. Yes, my name is Philip Caldwell, he said. I need to speak with Nero Wolfe. I believe my life is in danger. I stared at him. Then I called over my shoulder. It's Philip Caldwell, the real one, I presume. How do you know? Wolfe called back. Good question. How did I know? I studied the man carefully. He looked nervous but not terrified. He carried himself like someone used to authority. His suit was expensive but not flashy. His watch was a Rolex but an understated model. I'll vouch for myself, Caldwell said, as if reading my mind. I know that's worth exactly nothing given the circumstances. But I just flew in from Chicago after hearing about Margot Hendricks' murder, and I know she was killed by someone pretending to be Roland Jessup, just like Beatrice Hole was killed after someone pretending to be me was seen entering her building. Why come here? Because Margot Hendricks came to you for help yesterday. I checked with her assistant, and because if someone is impersonating me to commit murder, I need the best detective in New York to figure out who and why. I looked back at Wolfe, who had emerged from the office with Caesar and Mars flanking him. Your call. Wolfe studied Caldwell through the glass. Let him in. But search him first and keep the dogs close. I opened the door, patted Caldwell down thoroughly. found nothing but a wallet and a phone, and gestured him inside. The dogs surrounded him immediately, sniffing and assessing. Caldwell stood still, letting them inspect him. "Smart," he said, looking at the Dobermans. "I heard about your security measures." "This way," I said, leading him to the office. He sat in the red leather chair, the same chair where Margot Hendris had sat 16 hours earlier. The symmetry wasn't lost on me. "Mr. Caldwell," Wolfe said from behind his desk, "convince me you're who you claim to be." Caldwell pulled out his wallet and produced a driver's license, credit cards, and a business card from Hall Ventures. "I can provide fingerprints, DNA, whatever you need. I'm the real Philip Caldwell." "That proves identity, not innocence." "Why should I believe you're not involved in the murders?" "Because I was in Chicago when Beatrice Hole was killed. I have 17 witnesses. So did the Philip Caldwell, who was seen entering the Mercer building. Yet Margot Hendris swore it was you, Caldwell's face pad. That's impossible, is it? Someone studied you well enough to fool a professional colleague who'd known you for 8 years. Someone who could replicate your walk, your mannerisms, your behavior. That requires either extraordinary skill or your active cooperation. I didn't cooperate with anyone. I was in Chicago at a board meeting. Then someone is using you as a mask. The question is why?" Caldwell was silent for a moment. "Then the Whitmore deal. It has to be explained. 3 months ago, Beatrice asked me to oversee a major investment transaction between Whitmore Capital and Helix Therapeutics. It was routine work, verify the documentation, ensure the funds were transferred properly, coordinate with the other parties. But when I reviewed the paperwork, something didn't add up." "What specifically?" "The wire transfer authorizations. They showed the money leaving Whitmore Capital's account, but the receiving bank information for Helix Therapeutics was wrong. I flagged it to Beatrice. She said she'd handle it. Then the deal fell apart. Helix claimed they never received the funds, and Whitmore Capital claimed the money had been transferred. Where did the money go? I don't know, but I think Beatrice found out. She called me 2 days before she died and said she needed to discuss something urgent about the whip deal. We were supposed to meet, but she was killed before we could talk. And you think her discovery got her killed? Yes, and I think whoever killed her is now trying to frame me by impersonating me. If the police believe I was involved in fraud and murder, it deflects attention from the real culprit." Wolfe leaned back in his chair. "Who has access to your schedule, your habits, your mannerisms?" "Dozens of people. I work in a busy office. I travel constantly. I attend meetings and conferences. Anyone observing me over time could learn my patterns. Have you noticed anyone watching you, following you, paying unusual attention?" "No, but I haven't been looking." "Start looking. In the meantime, I need you to provide a complete list of everyone connected to the Whitmore deal. Everyone at Hole Ventures, Whitmore Capital, Hendricks and Lowe, and Helix Therapeutics who touched that transaction. Names, roles, relationships. I can do that, and I need to know where you were when Margot Hendris was murdered last night. Caldwell swallowed at my apartment alone. I'd just gotten back from Chicago. No alibi. Convenient. It's the truth. The truth is what I determine it to be, Mr. Caldwell. Until then, you're a suspect along with everyone else." Caldwell stood up, his hands clenched. "I came here for help and you'll receive it. But first I need to eliminate you as a conspirator. Go home. Prepare that list and don't leave town." After Caldwell left, I turned to Wolfe. "What do you think?" "I think," Wolfe said slowly, that we're dealing with something more complex than simple impersonation. Someone is orchestrating a very elaborate game using real people as chess pieces. The question is, what's the end game? To steal $50 million and kill anyone who discovers it? Perhaps. Or perhaps the money is secondary. Perhaps the real goal is something else entirely. Like what? Wolfe picked up his beer glass and found it empty. That Archie is what we need to find out before the shapeshifter claims their next victim. The doorbell rang again. This time it was Roland Jessup, and he looked terrified. Roland Jessup was a tall man with silver hair and the kind of commanding presence that came from years of making important decisions. But when I opened the door, chains still on, dogs still alert, he looked like someone who'd just seen his own ghost. "Please," he said, "I need help. The police think I murdered my business partner." I let him in, searched him, and brought him to the office where Wolfe was drinking his second beer of the morning and looking irritated that his routine was being disrupted by panicked clients. Jessup sat in the red leather chair, the third person in 18 hours to occupy that spot, and said without preamble, "I didn't kill Margot Hendress. I was at a charity gala with 200 witnesses, but the police say someone who looked exactly like me visited her apartment 15 minutes before she was shot. And I can't explain that because I don't know how it's possible." "It's possible," Wolfe said flatly, "because someone studied you well enough to replicate your appearance and behavior. The doorman at Margot Hendress's building swore it was you. He's known you for 3 years. Walter Kemp is a good man. If he says it was me, I believe he believes it. But it wasn't me." "Then who?" "I don't know. That's why I'm here. Philip Caldwell called me this morning and said he'd been to see you. He told me about the impersonations, the pattern Margot identified. He said you might be able to help. Philip Caldwell was just here." I said, "Interesting that you two are coordinating your stories." Jessup's eyes narrowed. "We're not coordinating anything. We're both being framed for murders we didn't commit, and we're both connected to the Whitmore deal that Beatus Hole and Margot were investigating. Tell me about your role in that transaction." Wool said, "I structured the investment vehicle. Hendricks and Lowe was hired by Whitmore Capital to create a legal framework for the $50 million investment in Helix Therapeutics. It was supposed to be straightforward, a special purpose entity that would hold the investment, provide tax advantages, and protect both parties. But when the money disappeared, our legal structure became evidence in the fraud investigation. Did you know the money would disappear?" "Of course not. We built a legitimate structure. If Whitmore Capital diverted the funds, that's on them, not us. Yet Margot Hendress was investigating. What did she find?" Jessup hesitated. "She thought there might be a problem with the wire transfer authorizations. She showed me some documents last week." "What documents?" "Transfer orders that looked valid, but had subtle irregularities. Small things that wouldn't be noticed unless you were looking carefully. Margot thought someone might have created duplicate transfer orders, sending some of the money to legitimate accounts and some to offshore accounts that looked similar enough to pass casual inspection. Sophisticated fraud. Very. It would require access to multiple banks, knowledge of international wire protocols, and the ability to create convincing forgeries. Margot thought it might involve someone at Hole Ventures or Whitmore Capital with insider knowledge. Philip Caldwell, she considered him, but she also considered Gerard Whitmore, Beatrice Hole herself, and several other people with access to the transaction details. Wolfe leaned forward slightly. When did you last see Margot Hendris? Yesterday afternoon, around 4:00. We had a meeting at the office to discuss her findings. She seemed worried but determined. She said she was going to confront someone about it. Did she say who? No, but she mentioned she'd been to see you at 6:00 and that you declined to help her. Wolfe winced almost imperceptibly. Continue. That was the last time I saw her. I left the office at 6:30 to prepare for the charity gala. I was there from 8 until past midnight. When I got home, the police were waiting to question me about Margot's murder. Did they show you the security footage from her building? No, but they described what Walter Kemp told them that I arrived at 11:15, went up to Margot's apartment, stayed 25 minutes, and left looking upset. Except I wasn't there. Who could impersonate you convincingly? Jessup spread his hands helplessly. I don't know. I'm not famous. I don't have a distinctive appearance. Anyone with similar build and hair color could probably pass at a distance. But to fool Walter Kemp, who sees me regularly, who knows how I talk and move, that requires real skill or inside knowledge. I suggested someone who's observed you closely, studied your habits, maybe even practiced impersonating you. But who and why? What? Because you're involved in the Whitmore fraud? Wolfe said bluntly. Or someone wants us to believe you are. Before Jessup could respond, the doorbell rang again. This time it was Inspector Kramer, and he wasn't alone. With him was a woman I didn't recognize, mid-30s, sharp-eyed, wearing a no-nonsense gray suit. She had the look of a federal agent, all business and suppressed impatience. Wolfe, Kramer said, barging past me into the office. This is Special Agent Kendra Torres from the FBI Financial Crimes Division. She has some questions about your recent clients. Agent Torres surveyed the office, the dogs, Wolfe's bulk behind his desk, and Roland Jessup sitting in the red chair. Mr. Wolfe, Mr. Jessup, convenient that you're both here. Not particularly, Wolfe said. What do you want? I want to know why 2 women connected to a $50 million fraud investigation are dead. Why multiple witnesses report seeing people who couldn't have been there, and why you seem to be at the center of it all. I'm not at the center. I'm investigating. You turned away Margot Hendris yesterday afternoon. 6 hours later, she was dead. Philip Caldwell visited you this morning. Roland Jessup is here now. So either you're incredibly unlucky, or you know something you're not sharing. Wolfe sighed. I know that someone is using skilled impersonation to commit fraud and murder. I know that the Whitmore capital investment in Helix Therapeutics involved diverted funds. I know that Beatrice Hole and Margot Hendris discovered something about that fraud and were killed for it. Beyond that, I'm still investigating. We've been investigating too, Torres said. And we found something interesting. She pulled out a tablet and showed us a photograph. This is Gerard Whitmore, founder of Whitmore Capital. I looked at the image. Mid-50s, distinguished looking, gray in hair, expensive suit. Nothing remarkable. He's missing, Torres continued. Has been for 3 days. His office says he went on vacation. His family says he never arrived. His passport hasn't been used. His credit cards are inactive. And his phone last pinged from a cell tower near the Mercer building on the morning Beatrice Hole was murdered. You think Whitmore killed her? I asked. I think Whitmore is either the killer or another victim. But here's the interesting part. She swiped to another photograph. This is security footage from a bank in the Cayman Islands taken 4 days ago. That's Gerard Whitmore, withdrawing funds from an account containing approximately $30 million, part of the missing $50 million from the Helix deal. Jessup said exactly, except Gerard Whitmore was in New York 4 days ago. We have security footage of him at his office, so either he's learned to teleport or someone is impersonating him too. The office went very quiet. How many people, Wolfe asked softly, has this shapeshifter become? At least 4 that we know of, Torres said. Philip Caldwell, Roland Jessup, Gerard Whitmore, and possibly others. And here's what worries me. The impersonations are escalating. First it was theft and fraud, then murder. What's next? As if in answer, my phone rang. It was Fred Durkin, who I'd sent to surveil Philip Caldwell. "Archie," he said, urgently, "you better get down here fast. Someone just shot Caldwell in broad daylight outside his office. He's alive, but barely, and the cops have a witness who swears the shooter was Caldwell himself." I hung up and looked at Wolfe. "Philip Caldwell's been shot. The witness says the shooter looked exactly like Caldwell." "Impossible," Roland Jessup said. "Caldwell was just here. Not anymore. He left 20 minutes ago. Plenty of time to get to his office and get shot by his own double." Wolfe closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, he looked at Agent Torres. "Where is Gerard Whitmore's office?" "Midtown." "Why?" "Because if the shapeshifter is cleaning up loose ends, and if Whitmore is either the next victim or the killer himself, we need to find him before someone else dies. We've been trying to locate him for 3 days." Torres said, "Try harder, and in the meantime, tell me everything you know about Whitmore's background, his training, his skills, his connections." Torres hesitated, then pulled up files on her tablet. Gerard Whitmore, 54, founded Whitmore Capital 5 years ago after leaving Hall Ventures. Before that, he worked for various investment firms. Started his career in Army intelligence, specialized in interrogation and psychological operations. Honorable discharge after 12 years. MBA from Wharton. No criminal record. Known as brilliant, but difficult to work with. Had a falling out with Beatrice Holay 6 years ago. She caught him manipulating client accounts and forced him to resign quietly rather than face prosecution. Psychological operations, Wolfe repeated. That includes impersonation, identity manipulation, infiltration. Yes. And according to his military records, he was very good at it. So we have a man trained in psychological warfare who's capable of sophisticated fraud, who has motive to kill the woman who forced him from his previous job, and who has the skills to impersonate multiple people convincingly. That's our theory, Torres said, but we can't prove it, and we can't find him. Wolfe looked at me. "Archie, call the hospital. Find out Caldwell's condition and whether he can talk. Then call Saul and tell him to focus on finding Gerard Whitmore. Check his known associates, his properties, anywhere he might hide. And what are you going to do?" "I'm going to think because we're missing something crucial. The shapeshifter isn't just hiding, he's performing, and performance requires an audience." Agent Torres frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Wolfe said slowly, "that all of these impersonations have been witnessed. Someone saw Philip Caldwell enter the Mercer building. Someone saw Roland Jessup visit Margot Hendris. Someone saw Gerard Whitmore in the Cayman Islands. These aren't covert operations. They're deliberate demonstrations. The shapeshifter wants people to see the impossibility, wants them to doubt reality. But why? To create chaos, Jessup said. To make the investigation impossible partly. But there's something else. Something we're not seeing. Wolfe looked at Kramer, who witnessed the shooting of Philip Caldwell. "I'll find out," Kramer said, pulling out his phone. While he made calls, I contacted the hospital and learned that Caldwell was in surgery. Critical, but stable. The bullets had missed vital organs, but he'd lost a lot of blood. Saul Panza called back to report that the overcoat I'd taken from Roland Jessup's office didn't belong to Jessup at all. The fiber analysis showed it was a high-quality replica, custom-made to match Jessup's coat exactly, but newer and with traces of theatrical makeup on the collar. So, someone made a duplicate coat specifically to impersonate Jessup, I said. "Not just the coat," Saul said. "I checked with the dry cleaner. Jessup's real coat was picked up yesterday morning at 9, but someone claiming to be Jessup's assistant dropped off an identical coat for cleaning that afternoon after Margot Hendricks was already dead. They were creating a false timeline, making it look like Jessup's coat had been cleaned before the murder to remove evidence. Except it wasn't Jessup's coat at all. Exactly. It was the impersonator's coat, which means they're not just impersonating people. They're creating physical evidence to support the impersonations." I relayed this to Wolfe, who nodded grimly. "The shapeshifter is meticulous. Military training, perhaps. Someone who understands that successful deception requires multiple layers of detail." Kramer hung up his phone. "The witness to Caldwell's shooting is a security guard named Marcus Powell. He was standing 10 FT away when it happened. He says the shooter approached Caldwell from behind, said something that made Caldwell turn around, then fired twice. Powell swears the shooter was Caldwell. Same height, same build, same face, same mannerisms. But it couldn't have been because Caldwell was the one who got shot. Where's this witness now? At the precinct, giving a statement. Why? Because I want to talk to him, and I want to talk to the doorman who saw Roland Jessup visit Margot Hendricks, and I want to talk to anyone else who's witnessed these impersonations. Bring them all here at 8-ish tonight. I can't just summon witnesses to your office. You can if you want to solve this case. Otherwise, the shapeshifter will keep killing, keep impersonating, keep creating impossible situations until we're all chasing phantoms while the real criminal escapes." Agent Torres looked skeptical. "You think you can solve this in one evening?" "I think Wolfe said that I can demonstrate something important. That eyewitness testimony, however certain, can be manipulated, and that the shapeshifter's greatest weapon isn't disguise. It's our willingness to believe what we see rather than what logic tells us must be true. Meaning someone is lying. And tonight, I'm going to prove who." The rest of the afternoon was controlled chaos. Saul Panza worked his network of contacts to locate Gerard Whitmore's known properties and associates. Oric Cather stationed himself at the hospital to guard Philip Caldwell and report if anyone suspicious tried to visit. Fred Durkin went back through the security footage from the Mercer building, the bank in the Caymans, and Margot Hendricks' apartment building, looking for any detail the police might have missed. Lon Cohen called it too, with more information on Whitmore's background. Your boy Gerard has quite a history. Besides the Army intelligence stint, he's got connections to some interesting people. Did you know he was roommates at Wharton with a man named Julian Ashford? Should that mean something? Julian Ashford runs one of the most successful private theater companies in New York, specializes in method acting workshops and immersive theater experiences. Also does consulting work for film studios on authentic character development. I whistled softly. So, Whitmore has a friend who's an expert in becoming other people. Gets better. Ashford's company recently hired a makeup artist named Simone Vasquez, who used to work for the CIA, creating disguises for undercover operatives. And guess who's listed as an investor in Ashford's theater company? Whitmore Capital. Bingo. Whitmore invested $2 million in Ashford's company 3 years ago, and according to incorporation documents, he occasionally participates in the theater workshops supposedly to improve his business presentation skills. But who knows what else he might have learned? Access to professional actors, method acting techniques, and a CIA-trained makeup artist. That's everything you'd need to become a convincing impersonator. Right, and here's the kicker. Simone Vasquez quit Ashford's company 2 weeks ago under mysterious circumstances. No forwarding address, no explanation, just vanished. Around the same time, the Whitmore fraud started unraveling. Exactly. I thanked Lon and reported to Wolfe, who was still at his desk, surrounded by financial documents, police reports, and the notes I'd taken from Margot Hendriss's apartment. "So, we have our answer," I said. Gerard Whitmore learned impersonation techniques through his friend's theater company, hired a professional makeup artist to help him perfect the disguises, and used those skills to steal $50 million while framing other people for the crime. Perhaps, Wall said, but it's not that simple. Why not? It fits perfectly. Whitmore has the military training, the psychological operations background, the acting skills, the makeup expertise. He had motive to kill Beatrice Hollet. She forced him out of his previous job. He had motive to kill Margot Hendriss. She was uncovering his fraud. And he has the means to impersonate Philip Caldwell, Roland Jessup, and anyone else he needs to become. Then, where is he? If Whitmore is the shapeshifter, why hasn't he fled to somewhere without extradition? Why stay in New York performing increasingly risky impersonations? Why shoot Philip Caldwell in broad daylight where witnesses could see to eliminate threats? Caldwell knew about the Whitmore deal irregularities. So did a dozen other people. Why not kill them all? Why this specific pattern of victims? I had no answer for that. Wolfe pushed aside his papers and looked at me. What bothers me most is the theatrical nature of these crimes. The shapeshifter doesn't just impersonate people. He makes sure someone sees him doing it. Someone credible, someone who knows the person being impersonated. That's not operational security. That's showing off. Maybe he enjoys it. Some criminals get off on the risk, or maybe the point isn't the crime itself. Maybe the point is the impossibility, making people doubt their own perceptions, creating situations where reality contradicts evidence. That psychological warfare, exactly what Whitmore was trained to do. The office phone rang. It was Saul Panza. I found something, he said. Whitmore owns a property in Queens under a shell company. Small warehouse converted to a studio apartment. Very private, no neighbors. I'm outside now. Should I go in? Wait for me, I said. I'm coming with you. I told Wolfe where I was going. He nodded. Take Caesar and Mars. If Whitmore is there, he may be dangerous. You're letting me take the dogs out of the brownstone. They're trained for protection and pursuit. Use them, but be careful. We don't know what we're dealing with yet. 20 minutes later, I was in Queens with Saul Panza and 2 very alert Dobermans. The warehouse was exactly as Saul described, isolated, nondescript, surrounded by industrial buildings. There were no other vehicles nearby, no signs of recent activity. We approached carefully. The front door was locked, but Saul made short work of it. Inside, the converted studio was dark and smelled of disuse. Empty, Saul said, flipping on lights. But it wasn't quite empty. In the back room, we found what could only be described as an impersonation laboratory. Makeup kits, professional lighting, wigs on mannequin heads, prosthetic pieces, clothing racks with multiple identical suits, shirts, overcoats, and honor-worked photographs, dozens of photographs of Philip Caldwell, Roland Jessup, Beatrice Hollet, Margot Hendris, and others I didn't recognize, each subject photographed from multiple angles in different lighting, capturing their expressions, their posture, their mannerisms. This is where he practiced, I said, photographing everything, where he became other people. Saul was examining the makeup kits, professional grade. Some of this equipment is custom made. And look at this. He held up a notebook filled with detailed observations, how each subject walked, talked, gestured, pages and pages of behavioral analysis. Caesar and Mars sniffed carefully around the space, alert but not aggressive. If Whitmore had been here recently, they'd have picked up his scent. He's gone, Saul said. Cleared out days ago. Probably right after Margot Hendris was killed. But he left this behind. Why? Because he didn't need it anymore, or because he wanted us to find it. I thought about what Wolfe had said that the shapeshifter was performing for an audience. Maybe both. He's showing us how good he is, proving that he can become anyone convincingly enough to fool people who've known them for years. So now what? Now we take all of this back to Wolfe and see what he makes of it. We loaded everything into Soar's car. The makeup kits, the photographs, the notebooks, the clothing. As we drove back to Manhattan, Caesar and Mars in the back seat, alert and watchful. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were playing exactly the game Whitmore wanted us to play. Finding the warehouse was too easy. The evidence was too perfect. The whole thing felt staged, like a theatrical reveal, which raised the question, what was Whitmore really trying to show us? Back at the brownstone, Wolfe examined everything we brought with focused intensity. He studied the photographs, read through the notebooks, inspected the makeup kits. Finally, he looked up. This is remarkable work. Detailed, systematic, professional. Whoever created this understood not just the mechanics of disguise, but the psychology of identity. Gerard Whitmore. Presumably, yet something is wrong. What? Wolfe held up one of the notebooks. These observations are too detailed, too personal. Look at this entry about Philip Caldwell. Adjusts tie when nervous, blinks rapidly when lying, laughs at own jokes, drinks coffee with 2 sugars, black, dislikes modern art, but pretends to appreciate it to seem cultured. That's intimate knowledge, the kind you only get from prolonged close contact or observation. Whitmore could have observed him over months perhaps, but look at this entry about Margot Ricks. Touches earlobe when thinking. Drums, fingers in patterns of 3, always late to morning meetings because she rewrites her notes the night before, secretly afraid of thunderstorms. How would Whitmore know these things? He hasn't worked with Ricks for years. Inside information. Maybe he had someone spying for him. Or, Wolfe said slowly, maybe Whitmore isn't the shapeshifter at all. Before I could respond, Fritz appeared at the door. Sir, your guests are arriving for the 8-hour meeting. I checked my watch. 7:55. Kramer had done his job. The witnesses were here. Show them to the office, Wolfe said. All of them. It's time to hear what they saw. At 8 Ruhr, the office was crowded. Kramer and Agent Torres stood near the door. The witnesses sat in chairs arranged in a semicircle. Walter Kemp, the doorman who'd seen Roland Jessup visit Margot Hendris. Marcus Powell, the security guard who'd seen Philip Caldwell shoot himself, and 3 others I hadn't met before. Wolfe introduced them. Lenore Patterson, head of security at the Peton Collection, who'd seen Lydia Watts steal the manuscript. Dr. Richard Ashworth, the doorman from Henrik Osgood's ex-wife's building, and Douglas Peton himself, the client who'd been defrauded by the fake Gerald Tavares stock. "You've all witnessed something impossible," Wolfe began. "You've seen people in places where they probably weren't, and you've been told you were mistaken, that you confused identity, that your memories are unreliable. I'm here to tell you that you're not mistaken. You saw exactly what you think you saw." Walter Kemp leaned forward. "Then how is it possible? How can Roland Jessup be in 2 places at once? He can't. But someone who studied him extensively enough, who learned his mannerisms and behaviors, who practiced becoming him, could fool even someone who knew him well, especially if they chose moments when Mr. Jessup had an ironclad alibi, creating an impossible situation that would make you doubt your own perceptions." "But why?" Lenore Patterson asked. "Why go to such lengths? To commit crimes while framing others, to create alibis by being elsewhere, and to demonstrate mastery over identity itself, a form of psychological warfare that makes victims feel helpless and investigators feel incompetent." Marcus Powell, the security guard, shook his head. "I saw Philip Caldwell shoot Philip Caldwell. That's not just impersonation, that's impossible, is it? Tell me exactly what you saw." Powell described the scene: Caldwell walking from his building, someone approaching from behind who looked exactly like him, a brief conversation, then 2 shots. Caldwell falling, the shooter fleeing. "The shooter's face?" Wolfe asked. "Identical to Caldwell. Same features, same expression, everything. Distance? 10 FT at most. Lightin'? Bright daylight. And you're certain it was Caldwell?" "Well, absolutely. I see him every day. I know his face, his walk, his." Powell stopped. "Wait, you're saying it wasn't really Caldwell? I'm saying you saw someone who'd perfected the art of being Caldwell. Someone who studied him so thoroughly that they could replicate not just his appearance, but his entire presence. And you saw this person at a time when the real Caldwell was vulnerable, creating a perfect crime scene where the victim and the perpetrator appeared to be the same person." Dr. Ashworth, the doorman from Henrik Osgood's building, spoke up. "I saw Mr. Osgood entered the building at 11 p.m. He had his characteristic limp. He spoke to me. I'm not mistaken. I don't think you are. But tell me, did he stop to chat as he usually did? Did he ask about your family? Did he behave normally?" Ashworth frowned. "Actually, no. He seemed rushed. Said he was in a hurry, but the limp was exactly right. And his face, theatrical makeup professionally applied, can create remarkable transformations. Add study of the subject's mannerisms, voice coaching, careful costume, and you can become convincing enough to fool someone who sees that person regularly, especially if your target is expecting them. But how could anyone practice Osgood's limp that precisely?" Ashworth protested. Wool gestured to the materials we brought from Whitmore's warehouse. "Through observation, study, rehearsal, look at these notebooks. They contain detailed behavioral analysis of multiple subjects, page after page of notes on how people move, speak, think, combined with professional makeup and costuming. An accomplished impersonator could replicate anyone." Douglas Peton, who'd been quiet until now, spoke. "The man I had dinner with at the Four Seasons wasn't just dressed like Gerald Tavistock. He knew things, personal things, about our business relationship, our past conversations. He convinced me to authorize a transfer of $200,000. How could an impersonator know all that? Through insider information, Agent Torres said, someone with access to Tavaristo's files, emails, records, someone who could study not just his appearance, but his entire professional history. Like who? Like Gerard Whitmore, I said, who worked in the same industry, who had connections throughout the investment world, who could easily have accessed confidential information. Wolfe raised a hand, perhaps, but Mr. Pemberton raises a crucial point. These impersonations aren't just visual, they're complete. The shapeshifter doesn't just look like their targets. They become them in every meaningful way. That requires not just skill, but knowledge. Intimate knowledge. What are you suggesting? Kramer asked. I'm suggesting that whoever created the laboratory we found in Queens, whoever compiled those detailed observations, whoever perfected these impersonations, has resources beyond what Gerard Whitmore alone could provide. The theater company, I said. Julian Ashford's company with professional actors and the CIA-trained makeup artist. Possibly, but consider this. The impersonations began 6 months ago. The Whitmore fraud became public 3 months ago. Yet Gerard Whitmore has been missing for only 3 days. If he's the shapeshifter, what was he doing between the first impersonations and his disappearance? No one had an answer. Wool looked at each witness in turn. I'm going to ask you all a question, and I want you to think carefully before answering. When you saw these impersonators, the fake Coldwell, the fake Jessup, the fake Osgood, the fake Watts, the fake Tavistock, did any of them speak to you? Walter Kemp nodded. The man I thought was Jessup said hello, asked me to call up to Miss Ricks's apartment. His voice exactly like Jessup's. Same tone, same cadence. Marcus Powell, the fake Coldwell, said something to the real Coldwell. I couldn't hear it clearly, but it made Caldwell turn around. Dr. Ashworth, the fake Osgood, said he was in a hurry, needed to see his ex-wife about urgent business. Lenore Patterson, the fake Watts, said, "Good evening," asked if the gallery was closing soon. Her voice was perfect. And Mr. Peaton, the fake Tavistock, and I had dinner for 2 hours. We talked about markets, investments, our families. His voice was indistinguishable from the real Tavistock. Wool nodded slowly. Voice matching is extraordinarily difficult. More difficult than visual disguise. It requires not just mimicry, but understanding of speech patterns, vocal timbre, regional accents, personal idioms. The fact that all of these impersonators could replicate their targets' voices suggests either exceptional talent or technological assistance. Technological Agent Torres asked voice modulation software real-time processing that can alter pitch, tone, cadence, combined with careful study of the target speech patterns. It could create convincing vocal impersonation. That's possible, Kramer asked. Not only possible, but increasingly common. Such technology is used in film dubbing, voice acting, and unfortunately, fraud. If our shapeshifter has access to such equipment, combined with the makeup and behavioral training we've already identified, they could create nearly perfect impersonations. I thought about the warehouse, the professional equipment, the detailed notebooks. So, we're not just dealing with an impersonator. We're dealing with someone who's assembled a complete toolkit for becoming other people. Makeup, costume, behavioral study, and voice technology. Exactly, which suggests substantial resources, careful planning, and specific purpose. This isn't casual fraud. This is a coordinated operation designed to create impossible crimes while framing innocent people. But why? Douglas Peaton asked. If someone can become anyone, why target us specifically? Why these particular crimes? That, Wolfe said, is the question I've been trying to answer. And I believe the answer lies in the pattern of victims and the crimes themselves. He stood, which was rare during interviews, and went to the map of Manhattan I'd hung on the wall. He marked locations with pins. The Mercer building where Beatrice Hole died. Margot Hendricks's apartment. The Four Seasons where fake Tavistock dined with Peaton. The Peaton collection where the manuscript was stolen. Henrik Osgood's ex-wife's building. What do you see? He asked. I studied the map. They're all clustered in Midtown and the Upper East Side. Wealthy neighborhoods, professional buildings, and what connects them. Agent Torres stepped forward. Financial crimes. Every victim or target is connected to high-level finance. Hole Ventures, Hendricks and Lowe, the Peaton Collection's endowment, Osgood's investment portfolio. Precisely. The shapeshifter isn't random. They're targeting a specific community of wealthy investors using impersonation to commit fraud and eliminate witnesses. But to what end? The $50 million from Whitmore Capital, I said. That's the prize. Everything else is misdirection. Is it? $50 million is substantial, but consider the resources expended on these impersonations. The time, the training, the equipment, the risk. Is it proportionate to the reward? Unless there's more money we don't know about, Agent Torres said. We've tracked $30 million to the Caymans. Where's the other $20 million? Or, Wolfe said quietly, perhaps the money is secondary. Perhaps the real goal is something else entirely. Something that requires creating chaos in the investment community, eliminating specific individuals, and demonstrating that reality itself can be manipulated. The office was silent. Outside, I could hear Manhattan traffic, the distant wail of sirens. Inside, 6 witnesses who'd seen the impossible sat waiting for Wolfe to explain what it all meant. I need more information before I can reach a conclusion, Wall said finally. But I can tell you this, Gerard Whitmore is not the shapeshifter. How can you be sure? Kramer demanded. Because Gerard Whitmore is dead. He has been for at least 4 days. And the real question we should be asking is, who killed him? The silence that followed Wolfe's pronouncement was profound. Then everyone started talking at once. How do you know Whitmore's dead? Agent Torres demanded. Where's the body? Kramer asked. If Whitmore's dead, who's impersonating him? I added. Wolfe raised a hand, quelling the commotion. I know Whitmore is dead because the security footage from the Cayman Islands showing him withdrawing funds is impossible. According to the timestamp, that withdrawal occurred at precisely the same time Gerard Whitmore was documented on security cameras at his New York office. The real Whitmore cannot be in 2 places at once. Therefore, the person in the Caymans was an impersonator. So someone impersonated Whitmore to steal the money, Torres said. That doesn't mean Whitmore's dead. It does when combined with other facts. Whitmore's disappearance began the same day the Cayman's withdrawal occurred. His phone went dead. His credit card stopped being used. His routine, which according to his office was rigorous and unchanging, completely ceased. And most tellingly, no one has received any communication from him since then. Not his office, not his family, not his business associates. Maybe he's on the run, Kramer suggested, hiding from the fraud investigation. A man trained in psychological operations and skilled enough to orchestrate complex financial fraud would know better than to simply vanish without covering his tracks properly. If Whitmore were alive and fleeing, we'd see deliberate misdirection, false trails, planted evidence, coordinated confusion. Instead, we have silence, the silence of death. But without a body, Agent Torres began, the body will be found eventually, but for now, consider the implications. Someone killed Gerard Whitmore and took his place, using his identity to access the stolen funds. Someone who knew about the Whitmore fraud, understood the financial mechanisms, and could become Whitmore, convincingly enough, to fool bank security. I was taking rapid notes. The same person who could become Philip Caldwell, Roland Jessup, Henrik Osgood, Lydia Watts, and Gerald Tavistock. Exactly. One shapeshifter, multiple identities. And now we must ask, why these specific identities? Walter Kemp raised his hand tentatively, like a student in class. May I ask something? If this shapeshifter is so skilled, why didn't they just become Gerard Whitmore from the beginning and steal the money quietly? Why involve all these other impersonations? It was an excellent question. Wolfe nodded approvingly because the other impersonations served different purposes. Philip Caldwell was impersonated to kill Beatrice Hole, who discovered the fraud. Roland Jessup was impersonated to kill Margot Hendris, who was investigating the fraud. The other impersonations, Osgood, Watts, Tavistock, were practice tests of the technique before the high-stakes crimes. So it's all connected to the Whitmore fraud, Kramer said. Kramer said to the $50 million, yes, but also to something larger. Consider who has died. Beatrice Holloway, who discovered irregularities in the Whitmore deal. Margot Hendris, who pursued those irregularities. Gerard Whitmore himself, who was either the fraud's mastermind or its first victim. And someone attempted to kill Philip Caldwell, who oversaw the transaction and knew its details. Someone's eliminating everyone connected to the fraud, Agent Torres said. Everyone who could identify the real criminal, Wolfe corrected, which suggests the shapeshifter is someone these victims knew, someone who works in their world, understands their business, and had access to their routines and habits. The theater company, I said. Julian Ashford. He's Whitmore's friend. He has the expertise. He has access to professional impersonators and makeup artists. Wall shook his head. Mr. Ashford is an artist, not a criminal mastermind. And more importantly, he lacks motive. The Whitmore fraud doesn't benefit him. The murders don't advance his interests. He's a tool, perhaps providing resources or training, but not the shapeshifter himself. Then who? Kramer demanded. Before Wolfe could answer, the office phone rang. I picked up Archie Goodwin. It's AE from the hospital. Caldwell just woke up. He's asking to talk to you, and Mr. Wolfe says he remembered something important. We'll be right there. I hung up and reported to Wolfe. He stood, reaching for his coat. Inspector Agent Torres, I'll need you to come with us. The rest of you should remain here with Saul Panza. If anyone attempts to contact you or approaches you claiming to be someone they're not, Saul will protect you. You think we're in danger? Dr. Ashworth asked nervously. I think you've all witnessed crimes. The shapeshifter would prefer remain secret until we identify and capture them. Anyone with knowledge is potentially at risk. We took 2 cars, Wolfe Kramer, Agent Torres and I, in one Stebbins driving. The hospital was 15 minutes away through light evening traffic. Philip Caldwell was in a private room with a police guard outside. He looked pale and weak. Ivy lines running into his arm, bandages wrapped around his chest, but his eyes were alert. "Mr. Wolfe," he said hoarsely, "thank you for coming. What did you remember, Mr. Caldwell?" "The shooter. When he approached me just before he fired, he said something. It's been bothering me, but I was too shocked to process it until now." "What did he say?" "He said, 'Tell Holay she was wrong about me.' Then he shot me twice and ran. The room went very quiet." "Hollow," Wolfe repeated. "Beatrice Holay. Yes, but she's dead. Why would the shooter reference her?" "Because," Wolfe said slowly, "the message wasn't for Beatrice Holay. It was for you. The shooter wanted you to understand that Holay had made a mistake about someone. Someone connected to the Whitmore fraud. Someone she'd misjudged or misidentified. But who? That's what I need you to tell me. Think back to your last conversations with Beatrice Holay. What did she say about the Whitmore deal? What had she discovered?" Caldwell closed his eyes, concentrating. "She called me 3 days before she died. Said she'd been reviewing the financial documents and found something wrong with the wire transfer authorizations. She thought someone at Holay Ventures might be involved in redirecting the funds. Did she name anyone? She said she suspected it might be internal, someone with access to our systems, our client accounts, our transaction protocols. Not Whitmore, she said. Whitmore was a convenient scapegoat, that the real fraud was more sophisticated than just him diverting funds. She thought multiple people were involved, creating a complex network of shell companies and offshore accounts. Agent Torres leaned forward. Did she have proof? She said she was gathering it, that she'd found a pattern in how certain accounts were structured, how certain transfers were authorized. She was going to confront someone. Who? Wolfe pressed. She didn't say. She just said she needed to be certain first, that the accusation was too serious to make without absolute proof. And then she was killed. Yes, by someone impersonating me. Someone who wanted to frame me for her murder. Wolfe was silent for a long moment, his eyes closed, fingers interlaced over his middle mound. I recognized the posture. He was thinking at maximum capacity. Finally, he opened his eyes. "Mr. Caldwell, who hired you at Holay Ventures?" "Beatrice herself. 8 years ago, I was working at another firm. She recruited me. And who else works closely with the Whitmore deal besides yourself?" "Several people. The transaction team, the legal department, the compliance officers. Name them." Caldwell listed 6 names. I wrote them all down. "And who has access to your schedule, your routines, your personal habits?" "My assistant, the office manager. My colleagues, your assistant's name, Simone Vasquez. She's been with me for 3 years. Very efficient. Very," he stopped. "Wait, Simone quit 2 weeks ago. Just disappeared. Left a note saying it was a family emergency. But when I tried to follow up, her phone was disconnected." I looked at Wolfe. "Simone Vasquez, the CIA-trained makeup artist who worked for Julian Ashford's theater company." "The same," Wolfe said. "And there we have our shapeshifter." Kramer pulled out his phone. "I'll get a warrant and an APB out immediately." "Wait," Wolfe said. "Consider what we know. Simone Vasquez worked for the CIA creating disguises. She then worked for Julian Ashford's theater company, learning method acting and character development. She became Philip Caldwell's assistant 3 years ago, giving her access to his schedule, his habits, his mannerisms. She quit 2 weeks ago when the Whitmore fraud began to unravel." "So she's our impersonator," Torres said. She studied everyone she needed to become, used her CIA training to create perfect disguises, and committed fraud and murder. But why? I asked. What's her motive? She's just an assistant. How does stealing $50 million benefit her? Wool turned to Caldwell. Was Simone Vasquez romantically involved with anyone at Hole Ventures? Caldwell frowned. Not that I know of. She was professional, kept to herself. Although he paused, she did seem close to one of our senior analysts. They had lunch together frequently, but I assumed it was just friendship. The analyst's name? Gerard Whitmore. Everything clicked into place. Not the Gerard Whitmore who founded Whitmore Capital, Wolfe said. His son, Agent Torres, pulled up files on her tablet. Gerard Whitmore Jr., age 31, works as a senior analyst at Hole Ventures, hired 4 years ago. According to his employment records, he changed his last name from Vasquez to Whitmore 5 years ago. Legal name change properly documented. Vasquez, I said. Simone's brother or husband, Wolfe corrected. Check the marriage records. Torres tapped on her tablet. Married 6 years ago. Simone Vasquez married Gerard Whitmore Jr. in a private ceremony. They kept different last names professionally. So Simone and Gerard Jr. are a team, Kramer said. She provides the impersonation skills. He provides the inside knowledge of Hole Ventures and the investment world. Not just a team, Wall said. Accomplices in patricide. Gerard Whitmore, Sr. forced Beatrice Hole to give him the option of quiet resignation or prosecution for fraud 6 years ago. He left in disgrace, founded Whitmore Capital, and spent the next years rebuilding his reputation. But his son never forgave Beatrice Hole for that humiliation. And when the Helix Therapeutics deal provided an opportunity for revenge and profit, he took it by using his father as the scapegoat. Torres said the younger Whitmore set up the fraud, made it look like his father was stealing the money, then killed his father and impersonated him to access the stolen funds. Precisely. With Simone's helps, Gerard Jr. created the appearance that his father was committing fraud. When Beatrice Hole began investigating, they killed her. When Margot Hendris pursued the investigation, they killed her. When Philip Caldwell knew too much, they attempted to kill him, all using Simone's impersonation skills to commit the crimes while framing others. Caldwell looked sick. Gerard worked for me. I trusted him. He had access to everything. Transaction records, client files, security protocols. And I never suspected. How could you? Wool said he was using his wife's skills to create perfect alibis while committing crimes as other people. It's brilliant in its audacity, and it would have worked, except for one fatal flaw. What flaw? They wanted recognition. Simone's background in theater. Gerard's desire to prove himself superior to his father both drove them to make the impersonations visible. They could have committed fraud quietly, but instead, they created a spectacle. They wanted people to see the impossible and feel helpless. That theatrical impulse led them to leave evidence to create patterns, to show off their skills. And that's how Margot Hendris discovered the pattern and came to me. Where are they now? Kramer demanded. Wolfe looked at me. Archie, where would someone go if they wanted to disappear after committing the perfect crime? I thought about it. Somewhere with the stolen money. Somewhere without extradition. Somewhere they could live well on $30 million. The Cayman Islands, Agent Torres said, where the money was withdrawn. They're probably already there. Perhaps, Wolfe said. Or perhaps they're still in New York, waiting for the perfect moment to vanish. After all, They've demonstrated remarkable patience and planning. They wouldn't rush their exit. I'll contact Cayman authorities, Torres said, stepping out to make calls. Kramer looked at Caldwell. You're sure Gerard Whitmore Jr. had access to everything he'd need to commit this fraud? Absolutely. A senior analyst, he reviewed all major transactions. He knew the wire transfer protocols, the authorization procedures, the account structures. If anyone could divert funds without being noticed, it would be him. And Simone had access to your schedule, your habits, everything she'd need to impersonate you convincingly. Yes, she arranged my meetings, managed my calendar, knew my routines. She could have studied me for years without me realizing. Wolfe stood. We need to return to the brownstone. If Gerard and Simone are still in New York, they'll be monitoring the investigation. When they realize we've identified them, they'll either flee immediately or attempt one final strike to eliminate witnesses. The witnesses we left at your office, I said, feeling my stomach drop. Exactly, with Saul Panza for protection. But if Simone can impersonate anyone, she could appear as a police officer, a delivery person, anyone with access to the brownstone. We raced back through Manhattan, Stebbins pushing the car as fast as traffic allowed. Wool sat silent and tense, which for him was the equivalent of panicking. When we pulled up to the brownstone at 9:45, everything looked normal. The lights were on. The dogs would be inside. Saul would have the witnesses secured in the office. But something felt wrong. I opened the door with my key. Wolfe behind me, Kramer and Stebbins flanking us. The hallway was quiet. Too quiet. Saul, I called. No answer. Caesar appeared at the end of the hallway, his dark eyes alert. He didn't bark, but his posture was tense. Behind him came Mars, then Apollo, Minerva, Diana, and finally Loyal, the pit bull's brick-red coat catching the light. They weren't attacking, but they weren't relaxed either. Something had put them on edge. I drew my gun and moved forward carefully. The office door was open. Inside, I could see the witnesses sitting exactly where we'd left them. Walter Kemp, Marcus Powell, Lenore Patterson, Dr. Ashworth, Douglas Peaton, but Saul Panza was on the floor, unconscious, and standing near Wolfe's desk, smiling slightly, was a perfect replica of Inspector Kramer. "Evening, Wolfe," the fake Kramer said in the inspector's voice. "I figured you'd solve it eventually. You're good at that, but I'm better at this." The real Kramer stepped into the office behind us. "What the hell?" The fake Kramer moved fast, pulling a gun and pointing it at the witnesses. "Nobody move. I'm walking out of here. Anyone tries to stop me, these people die." "Simone," Wolfe said calmly, "or should I call you Mrs. Whitmore?" The fake Kramer smiled, and in that smile, I could see the person underneath. Young, female, brilliant, and absolutely ruthless. "You can call me the shapeshifter. It's more poetic. Where's your husband? Waiting for me. With $30 million and 2 new identities, we're very good at becoming other people, Mr. Wolfe. We'll disappear, and you'll never find us. You killed your father-in-law. Gerard Sr. was a liability. Weak, sentimental, easy to frame. We used him perfectly. Let him take the blame for the fraud while we took the money. And Beatrice Olay deserved it. She destroyed my husband's father, humiliated him publicly. We gave her what she deserved. Margot Hendress, wrong place, wrong time. Should have minded her own business. And Philip Caldwell, he knew too much, but apparently not good enough with a gun. I'll have to finish the job later." She was backing toward the door, gun steady on the witnesses. The dogs watched but didn't move. They'd been trained not to attack unless commanded, and no one had given that command yet. "You won't escape," Wolfe said. "Agent Torres has already contacted the Cayman authorities. Your accounts are frozen. Your identities are compromised. Even if you reach the airport, you'll be arrested. We have other accounts, other identities, other plans. You think the Caymans was our only backup? We've been planning this for years." She reached the hallway. The dogs parted slightly, letting her pass, but keeping her in sight. Loyal's eyes never left her. "One last thing," fake Kramer said. "This whole performance, watching you chase shadows while we committed the perfect crimes, it's been the role of a lifetime. Goodbye, Mr. Wolfe." She turned to run. That's when Wolfe said very quietly, "Caesar, Mars, Apollo, Diana, Minerva, Loyal, stop her." The dogs moved as one, 6 trained animals, each weighing between 45 and 90 lb, launched themselves at the fleeing figure. Simone fired twice, but the dogs were too fast, too many. Caesar hit her first, knocking the gun away. Mars and Apollo pinned her arms. Diana and Minerva secured her legs. Loyal stood on her chest, his brick-red bulk making breathing difficult, his dark eyes staring into hers. It was over in 3 seconds. "Get 'em off," Simone screamed, the voice still Kramer's, but the persona shattered. "Saul needs medical attention," Wolfe said to the real Kramer, ignoring her. "And you should arrest Mrs. Whitmore for multiple murders. I believe you'll find more than sufficient evidence at the warehouse in Queens, including her complete impersonation laboratory." Kramer and Stebbins moved quickly, calling for backup and paramedics. The dogs held Simone until the handcuffs were on, then released her at Wolfe's command. She lay on the floor, breathing hard. The Kramer disguise starting to smear. Underneath, I could see glimpses of the real person, young, dark-haired, unremarkable, except for her eyes, which held rage and calculation. "Where's your husband?" Kramer demanded. She laughed. "You'll never find him. Gerard's better at disappearing than I am at disguises. He's gone, the money's gone, and you can't prove anything." "We can prove everything," Agent Torres said, arriving with additional agents. "We found the body of Gerard Whitmore, Sr., in the East River 2 hours ago. The coroner's preliminary report indicates he was killed 4 days ago. DNA evidence on the body includes samples from both you and your husband. We have the warehouse, the disguises, the financial records, and we have your victim's testimony. You're finished." Simone's composure finally cracked. "It was supposed to be perfect. We studied everyone, practiced for years." "How did you know?" "The theater," Wolfe said. "You couldn't help but perform. Every impersonation was a show deliberately witnessed, carefully staged. A true professional would have worked invisibly. But you wanted recognition, wanted to demonstrate your skill. That theatrical impulse was your undoing." She was still laughing as they led her away, a broken, bitter sound that echoed in the hallway. Saul Panza woke up 20 minutes later with a headache and a bruised ego. "She came in as you," he told Wolfe. "Perfect replica. Said you'd sent her back to get some files. The dogs didn't react because they know you. By the time I realized something was wrong, she'd hit me with a sap." "The dogs knew," I said, pointing to Caesar and the others, who'd returned to their protective positions around the office. "That's why they were tense when we arrived. They knew something was off, but they couldn't identify what." Wolfe nodded. "Even perfect disguise can't fool canine senses completely. The scent would be wrong. The subtle behavioral cues different. The dog's alertness was our first warning. The rest of the evening was organized chaos. Agent Torres coordinated with federal and local authorities. Kramer took statements from all the witnesses. Stebbins led a team to search for Gerard Whitmore, Jr., though I suspected Simone had been right about him being long gone. At 11, Agent Torres received a call from the Cayman Islands. They found Gerard Whitmore, Jr. attempting to board a private plane to Venezuela. He's in custody, and they're extraditing him tomorrow. So she was wrong about him getting away. I said she was wrong about many things, Wolfe replied, including the assumption that perfect impersonation would be enough. The shapeshifter could become anyone's face, anyone's voice, anyone's mannerisms, but they couldn't become their soul, and that's what made the difference. Fritz appeared with beer for Wolfe, and coffee for the rest of us. The witnesses had been allowed to leave, thanked for their cooperation and assured of their safety. The office was quiet except for the soft breathing of the dogs and the tick of the clock. "One question," I said to Wolfe. "When did you know it was Simone Vasquez?" When Philip Caldwell mentioned his assistant had quit suddenly 2 weeks ago. The timing was too convenient. And when we learned her maiden name was Vasquez, the same as Gerard Whitmore Jr.'s birth name, the connection became clear. But how did you know she'd come here tonight? Because she's theatrical. She couldn't resist one final performance, appearing as Inspector Kramer, threatening us in our own office, demonstrating her superiority. It was predictable once I understood her psychology. You risked the witnesses' lives. I risked nothing. The dogs were here. Saul was here. And I knew she'd hesitate before actually killing anyone. Her crimes were calculated, not passionate. She killed to protect her fraud, not for pleasure. Given the choice between murder and escape, she'd choose escape until the dogs stopped her. Wolfe smiled slightly until the dogs fulfilled their purpose. Caesar, Mars, Apollo, Minerva, Diana, and Loyal. They've earned their dinner tonight. As if understanding, all 6 dogs looked up, tails wagging slightly. Loyal's notched ear twitched. At midnight, Kramer finally left, exhausted but satisfied. 2 murders solved, a $50 million fraud untangled, and the most skilled impersonator I've ever seen behind bars. Not bad for a Monday. "It's technically Tuesday," I pointed out. "Don't remind me." He settled his hat on his head. "Wolfe, I owe you an apology. You were right about Margot Hendris. I should have taken her seriously when she first came to us." "She came to me first," Wolfe said quietly, "and I turned her away. That mistake cost her life. I won't forget it." After Kramer left, Wolfe sat at his desk with his second beer, staring at the orchids Fritz had brought down from the plant rooms. A particularly beautiful yellow catleer that had just bloomed. "The shapeshifter believed she could become anyone," he said finally. "But she never understood that identity isn't just appearance or behavior. It's the accumulation of choices, experiences, relationships. You can mimic someone's face, copy their voice, study their habits, but you can't become their history. You can't replicate the 1,000 small moments that make someone who they are." "Philosophical for midnight," I said. "Practical for detective work. The shapeshifter failed because she thought identity was performance. But real identity is truth, and truth always reveals itself eventually, even through perfect disguise, especially through perfect disguise. Because the more perfectly you pretend to be someone else, the more clearly your own nature shows through the cracks." I thought about Simone Vasquez lying on our hallway floor with 6 dogs holding her down. Her Kramer disguise smearing to reveal the bitter, angry person underneath. She almost got away with it. Almost isn't enough. In detective work, as in life, either you succeed or you fail. There's no partial credit for perfect crimes that end in handcuffs. What about the money? The $20 million that's still missing. Agent Torres will find it. The Whitmore thought they'd hidden it cleverly. But financial crimes leave trails always. The money will be recovered and returned to Helix Therapeutics. And Philip Caldwell, Jessup, the other people whose identities were stolen will recover. Traumatized perhaps, but alive, which is more than can be said for the shape-shifters' victims. We sat in silence for a while. The dogs settled into sleep, their protective positions relaxing. Fritz had gone to bed. The brownstone was quiet. "Sir," I said finally, "why did you really take this case? After rejecting Margot Hendricks, what made you change your mind?" Wool looked at me, his dark eyes thoughtful. "Because she came here for help and I failed her. Because she died 6 hours after leaving this office. And because I realized that sometimes the impossible is simply the possible disguised by excellent deception. My job is to strip away disguises and reveal truth. That's what I do. Even when it means admitting you were wrong, especially then. Pride is expensive. Archie Margot Hicks paid the price for mine. I won't make that mistake again." It was as close to an apology as Wolfe ever came. I accepted it. The next morning, Wednesday, I came down to breakfast to find Wolfe already in the office, reading the Gazette's coverage of the shapeshifter case. Lon Cohen had gotten the exclusive and milked it for all it was worth. Master impersonator caught by fame, detective with a subtitle about sophisticated fraud, murder, and the dogs that saved the day. "Fame suits you," I said, pouring coffee. "Fame is tedious," Wolfe grumbled. "People will want appointments, interviews, photographs. I'll have to refuse them all. You could always hide in the plant rooms." That's the plan. The phone rang. It was Agent Torres with an update. I put her on speaker. "Good morning, Mr. Wolfe. Thought you'd want to know. We found the missing $20 million. Gerard Whitmore Jr. had hidden it in accounts under assumed names in 3 different countries. We're working with international authorities to recover it." "Excellent. And Whitmore himself extradited last night. He's in federal custody facing charges for conspiracy to commit fraud, murder, and about 15 other counts. He'll be in prison for the rest of his life. And his wife, Simone Vasquez Whitmore, is equally cooperative now that she realizes there's no escape. She's provided detailed information about every impersonation, every crime, every step of their plan, including the murder of Gerard Whitmore, Sr., which was apparently her idea. Of course it was. Wolfe said, the theatrical ones always lead. She admitted that killing the elder Whitmore was meant to serve 2 purposes: eliminate a potential witness and create the perfect scapegoat for their fraud. They dumped his body in the East River, then used Simone's disguise skills to impersonate him in the Cayman Islands and withdraw the funds. "Patricide and grand theft," I said. "Quite an accomplishment. They thought they were untouchable," Torres said. "Simone told me they'd been planning this for 5 years. Gerard Jr. got the job at Hole Ventures specifically to access their transaction systems. Simone took the position as Philip Caldwell's assistant to study him. They practiced impersonations for months before committing any crimes in the theater connection," Wolfe asked. "Simone worked for Julian Ashford's company before becoming Caldwell's assistant. That's where she met Gerard Jr. He was taking acting workshops there. They fell in love, got married, and decided to combine their skills for profit. A partnership of deception. Exactly. Ashford had no idea what they were planning. He's horrified. We've cleared him of any involvement. What about the earlier impersonations? Henrik Osgood, Lydia Watts, Gerald Tavistock. Practice runs. They wanted to perfect their technique before the high-stakes crimes. Osgood's ex-wife died of an overdose that was really murder. The manuscript theft from the Peaton collection was pure greed. The Tavistock fraud was testing whether they could maintain an extended impersonation. Each crime taught them something new, and the final victims, Hole and Ricks, eliminating threats. Beatrice Hole discovered the fraud. Margot Hendris was pursuing it. Both had to die to protect the Whitmore's plan. What about Philip Caldwell's shooting? Simone admits to that too. Caldwell knew too much about the Whitmore transaction. She impersonated him to commit the shooting, creating the impossible image of Caldwell shooting himself. If he died, it would have been dismissed as suicide or madness. But he survived. Thanks to the security guard who witnessed the shooting. I said his testimony convinced us the impersonation was real. All the witnesses helped. Their certainty that they'd seen the impossible made us take the case seriously. Without them, the Whitmores might have succeeded. After Torres hung up, Wolfe finished his beer and looked at me. Arrange payment from Philip Caldwell and his insurance company. Our standard fee plus expenses already done. They're grateful. Caldwell's recovering well, by the way. Says he'll be back at work next month. Good. And the witnesses all safe. Walter Kemp got a commendation from his building management. Marcus Powell has been offered a position as head of security at Caldwell's company. The others are just relieved it's over. As am I. Wolfe stood. I'm going to the plant rooms. Theodore and I have work to do. The Phalaenopsis among others. Real beauty requires patience, care, and truth. Unlike identity, which apparently can be bought with makeup and practice, but not sustained. Truth always reveals itself. Eventually, he paused at the door. Archie, when the next impossible client arrives, remind me that the impossible is usually just the difficult in disguise. I'll remind you. Will you listen? Probably not, but try anyway. He went upstairs, leaving me with coffee, case files to organize, and 6 dogs who'd proven themselves more valuable than any security system money could buy. Caesar came and rested his head on my knee. I scratched behind his ears. Good job, I told him. You and the others. Wolfe might not say it, but you saved lives yesterday. His dark eyes looked at me with what might have been understanding. Or maybe he was just hoping for treats. With dogs, it's sometimes hard to tell. The phone rang again. This time, it was Kramer. Goodwin, one more thing. We searched the warehouse thoroughly. Found something interesting. What a target list. Simone had compiled names of people she planned to impersonate next. Looks like she was thinking long-term. Politicians, celebrities, corporate executives. The shapeshifter operation was meant to continue indefinitely. But you caught her. Thanks to Wolfe and those damn dogs. Tell him I said so. No, I will. But he'll just say he was doing his job. Yeah, well, his job saved a lot of lives. Make sure he knows that too. I hung up and went to tell Wolfe, but he was already deep in conversation with Theodore about orchid cultivation. Through the glass walls of the plant rooms, I could see him examining a particularly delicate bloom, his concentration complete. This was his world order, beauty, logic. The chaos of the shapeshift case was already receding in his mind, replaced by the precise rhythms of botanical care. But I knew he wouldn't forget Margot Hendris, wouldn't forget that she'd come to us for help, and he'd turned her away. That mistake would stay with him. A reminder that even the impossible deserves serious consideration. I went back to the office and finished organizing the case files. The dogs settled into their various positions. Caesar near the door, Mars by the window, Apollo and Diana flanking my desk, Minerva in her corner, Loyal at my feet. The brownstone returned to its normal state of watchful calm. Outside, Manhattan continued its endless motion. Millions of people, each with their own identity, their own truth. Some of them would lie, cheat, steal, pretend to be someone they weren't, but most would simply be themselves, for better or worse. And if another shapeshifter emerged, if another impossible case walked through our door, we'd be ready. Wolfe would think, I would investigate, Fritz would feed us, and the dogs would protect us. That was our identity, our truth. And unlike Simone Vasquez, we couldn't change it even if we wanted to, which was just fine with me. I leaned back in my chair, Loyal's warm weight against my feet, and smiled. Another case closed, another mystery solved. Another day in the brownstone on West 35th Street, where the impossible became possible and the truth always came out. Eventually, 3 weeks later, a package arrived addressed to Nero Wolfe. Inside was a single photograph. Margot Hendris, taken at some business function, smiling and confident and alive. On the back, someone had written, "Thank you for finding the truth." From her family. Wolfe looked at it for a long moment, then placed it carefully in his desk drawer. He didn't say anything, but he didn't need to. Some debts can't be repaid. Some mistakes can't be undone. But justice can be served. Truth can be found. And sometimes that has to be enough. The dogs lay quiet in the afternoon sun. Fritz prepared dinner in the kitchen. The orchids bloomed in the plant rooms above, and Nero Wolfe returned to his book, a man at peace with himself and his work for now. But somewhere in Manhattan, I knew another impossible case was waiting, another client who would walk through our door with a story that defied logic, challenged perception, and demanded investigation. And when they came, we'd be ready, because that's what we do. Solve the impossible, find the truth, and never ever turn away someone who genuinely needs help, even if they seem a little crazy at first. Sometimes, as the shapeshifter case proved, crazy is just truth wearing a disguise. And stripping away disguises, that's what Nero Wolfe does best. And so, the shapeshifter case came to an end. Once again, Nero Wolfe solved what seemed impossible and revealed the truth. But in the dark streets of Manhattan, the next mystery is already waiting. Another client, another impossible story, and once again, Nero Wolfe's sharp intellect and Archie Goodwin's determination will come into play. If you enjoyed this story, visit us at youtube.com/@NeroWolfeMysteries. To subscribe to the channel, hit that like button and turn on notifications to stay updated on new Nero Wolfe adventures. That's youtube.com/NeroWolfeMysteries, all one word. And let's not forget to give our thanks to Caesar, Mars, Apollo, Diana, Minerva, and Loyal, the true heroes. Until the next story, take care of yourselves and remember, the truth always comes out eventually, even when disguised. This is Nero Wolfe Mysteries. See you next time.